Welcome. I would like to call to order the Gig Harbor City Council meeting of Monday, September 27th, 2021, and the time is 5:32. This is a virtual meeting. Tonight's City Council meeting will be broadcast live on Zoom. Residents can either give comment during the public comment portions of the meeting by pressing the raise hand button on the bottom of your Zoom window or by pressing the *9 on your phone. Please wait to be called on when the time is right. Public comment on these items that are not on the agenda will be separate from each comment portion that is at each council bill. Public comment is not a Q&A, but a time to make a public statement. With that, I'd like to do roll call. Councilmember Abersol.
Here.
Councilmember Denson.
Here.
Councilmember Franich.
Here.
Councilmember Hines.
Here.
Councilmember Markley.
Here.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Wook.
Here.
And this is Mayor Kuhn. From staff, we have our intern city administrator, Tony Pasecki.
Here.
Interim city clerk, Josh Decker.
Here.
City attorney, Daniel Kinney.
Here.
Public Works Director, Jeff Langhelm.
Here.
Community Development Director, Katrina Knudsen.
Here.
And our Finance Director, Dave Rodenbach.
Here.
Police Chief, Kelly Busey.
I'm here.
Wastewater Treatment Plant Manager, Daryl Wienans.
Here.
Principal Planner, Carl DeSimas.
Here.
And we have some special guests. We have Dr. Elly. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have Kevin Leon from where do you go? What's his title? I know I can't see you. Anyway, he's a Department of Ecology, Environmental Engineer. Welcome. And we have Evan Londo Cooper. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. That's our climate, Pierce County.
Yes, sir.
Welcome in, everyone. Is there anyone that I have missed? Please speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. With that, I'd like to have everyone join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to ask council if they have any changes to the agenda, but before I do that, if there's no objection, we will move new business item 4 to the front of the new business. So it would be 1 to be heard as the first. This is so staff and our listeners, then we may have several of them for that particular item, may not have to wait through the whole meeting to discuss this matter. Is council okay with this? And I'll start with Councilmember Denson, if you had a question.
I like the idea of being efficient with our time. However, I think whoever is here to speak probably wanted to speak during the section items. Are they gonna have a chance to speak in items not on the agenda before we take this up?
Yes. Items that are not on the agenda will come before any of that.
Okay, then I'm okay with that.
Okay. And I'm not moving 3 because I don't like it. I don't like to move things because people may have planned, to wait a little bit to join in. So we only do it when we have to. So, okay, if there's no objection, we'll move item number 4 of new business to the first of new business. Any changes by council members other than that? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay. Consent agenda Passes 7-0. We have 3 presentations tonight. Our first is our 2020 Wastewater Treatment Plant Outstanding Performance Award. And to go over that and explain this as Public Works Director Jeff Langhelm.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Wanted to note that we have, as you noted also in the introductions, Daryl Winans, Wastewater Treatment Plant Superintendent here, and also the Department of Ecology and Environmental Engineer, Kevin Luong. And we also have, I believe in the attendees also, treatment plant staff. So I just wanted to go over, first I'm going to show on the screen the actual letter we received. So we received a letter recently, earlier this summer, from the Department of Ecology notifying us that we received the 2020 Wastewater Treatment Plant Outstanding Performance Award. Department of Ecology is the state agency that reviews our National Pollution Discharge Elimination System and operating permit for the treatment plant. The award that we received tonight or this year is given to those treatment plants that remain within all of their permitting requirements every day of the year. While the letter notes that this is the 4th consecutive year that the city's received this award, I think that the bigger highlight that I wanted to point out is this is also out of the last 15 years of this award being provided to the city, we've received it 14 out of those last 15 years. So we've had a very good track record of receiving these outstanding performance awards. I know after working with our crew for many years now that they're a very conscious group. They're conscious of their impacts on the public based on the work they do and conscious of the impacts on the environment. They work nights, they work weekends, they do whatever it takes to protect the public and the environment. That is seen through their daily tasks and noticed here in our Outstanding Performance Award. So I want to say congratulations to Daryl and everyone who works the treatment plant. I'm going to hand this off quickly to Mr. Leung to say a few words, and then I think Daryl wants to say a few words also.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Leung from Department of Ecology. So I am the city's wastewater NPDES permit manager at Ecology. So I'm happy to be here to join City of Gig Harbor and to recognize and celebrate the 2020 Wastewater Treatment Plant Outstanding Performance Award for the City of Gig Harbor Wastewater Treatment Plant. As Jeff mentioned that this is an annual evaluation, especially for year 2020. Daryl and his staff did outstanding job meeting the permit monitoring requirement, reporting requirement, or other requirement according to the permit as well. Especially during the COVID-19 in the year 2020, we all aware and they face different challenges with the safety, with the wastewater production and produce effluent quality. So with that, in the whole year, it's not very easy. So I really appreciate the city management team continue to support Daryl and his team, provide the resource and support for him to continue to do the job. I think the City of Gig Harbor and the Ecology share the same goal. We are here to protect the waters of Washington. We hope and the city and Daryl and his team will continue to do the same job in the future as well. Congratulations. Thank you.
Yes, you know, I see this come across my desk. It seems like it's almost every year, and it's not something to take for granted. You know, this is a big deal. And so, Daryl, we're very proud of all of your staff and all of the hard work that you work to perform to make this possible. So we'd love to hear you say a few words, and we thank all of your crew.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. Langhelm, Mr. Leong. We appreciate and thank you for the presentation of the award, Outstanding Performance Award. We want to kind of reiterate what has been said, but we strive to provide the highest level of treatment to the water we return to the Puget Sound, both physically and fiscally. We also strive to give the highest level of prompt and courteous service to all we serve. As I've always said, it takes a team to accomplish it. From the mayor and council supporting our operations, rehabilitation of the aging infrastructure, and to maintain a viable, cost-effective utility. Mr. Leong, who manages our permit for the Department of Ecology and provides us with support and information to help us achieve our permit requirements, goals, and awards. Mr. Langhelm, with his constant support and guidance in the day-to-day operations, and the support from each of the divisions within the city. With the pandemic and being short-staffed, we went through an interesting year, to say the least. Just when we thought it was getting better, here we go again. Through these craziest of times, there's been one constant, and that's been my crew. Specifically, Jim Landon, Senior Operator, Chuck Roy, Senior Operator, Nancy Nair, Public Works Assistant, Lawrence Washburn, Collections Tech, Ty Davis, Maintenance Tech, and John Osga, retired. This is not my entire staff, but this period of craziness, they did it all. We never missed a beat, physically working on site every day, following the protocols to maintain our safety and prevent the spread of the virus. These people stepped up through it all, and for that, I'm deeply appreciative of their efforts to make this day possible. After a long time in coming, we are finally back to pre-pandemic staffing levels, and I'd like to introduce the newest members of our team. I don't know if they're watching. I was hoping they'll be on, maybe see them in the background. I don't know if that works that way or not with your Zoom, but Brian Fletcher, operator, Robert Hahn, operator, and Tyler Ellingbo, who's operator in training. I believe once each of these have received the necessary training and institutional knowledge, they're going to be an outstanding additions to our team. And in the short time since their arrival, they're already giving us some much needed relief, and look forward to seeing what they can do, future brings for them. And thank you all for your support, Mayor, Council, Jeff, Kevin, the entire city staff. We touch everybody within the city in some way in operation, whether it's finance, engineering, planning, and we deeply appreciate all of your support to help make all this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Tyler's listening, and maybe some others are too. If anyone else wishes to speak, we're happy to have them. So from the treatment plant. So thank you. Councilmember Wu.
Yes, thank you. To Daryl and to his whole team. You know, sometimes you can do something once, but to do something 14 out of 15 times is truly remarkable when you're on the job 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days every year, and especially last year during the pandemic. Thank you for keeping our water clean. Thank you for taking care of the environment and for keeping everybody safe. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, your team, everyone. We're proud of you.
Thank you.
And our second presentation tonight is the climate of Pierce County, which is Dr. Elly. I'm sorry, Dr. Elly. Welcome.
Thank you. And it's great to follow up that presentation because it's so appropriate. Good evening, Mayor Kuhn and council members. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak tonight. I am Dr. Elly Claus-McGahan, and I'm speaking for Climate Pierce County. Our presentation is a collaborative effort from many people representing many organizations, all working towards reducing emissions and furthering climate justice in Pierce County. We will share the slides after the presentation so that you can check out the details more easily because some of them may go a little fast. Tonight, we ask you to build climate collaboration into your comprehensive plan while addressing specific climate actions you can take. We'll look briefly at Vision 2050 climate policy, take you through climate changes already affecting our health, our environment, and our pocketbooks, followed by predictions of what's to come, constituent support for climate action, and our ask in more detail. Vision 2050 has two policies addressing cities and counties. The first is reducing greenhouse gas emissions and climate mitigation. Cities and counties will incorporate emissions reductions policies and actions such as reducing vehicle miles traveled, climate-friendly building codes, cleaner transportation, and energy to support the regional goal of 45% reduction by 2030. So that's reducing emissions. And the second one says comprehensive plans will identify mitigation measures addressing climate impacts like sea level rise, flooding, wildfires, urban heat, and other hazards, paying particular attention to highly impacted communities and vulnerable populations. So what are the climate concerns we're looking at in Pierce County? 8 of the 10 top peak floods of the Puyallup River have occurred since 2006. Extreme rain events in the fall and the rising riverbed from sedimentation coming down from Mount Rainier as the glaciers recede make repeated flooding inevitable. River flooding affects health, homes, roads, farms, septic systems, salmon, and other wildlife. Floodwaters also mix pollutants and toxins into a soup that affects groundwater, freshwater wells, the river, and eventually Puget Sound. Sea level rise causing flooding during king tides and flooding in Gig Harbor's harbor. Add storm to that mix and salt water is driven even further inland, causing damage to shoreline properties, housing, erosion, cliff landslides, and saltwater intrusion. Extreme rain events flood roads in and near Gig Harbor. There's Gig Harbor underwater a bit. Sea level rise challenges some of the key peninsula bridges. The need for more Pierce County residents to have flood insurance is now well known. The U.S. drought monitoring map for Washington shows right now the whole state is dry with severe issues for our food producing regions in Eastern Washington. We're happy that it's now raining a bit. Summer 2020's wildfires had devastating impacts for folks in Graham and Bonnie Lake and will not be an isolated event in Pierce County. The changing precipitation pattern causes spring and summer dryouts we didn't have before, setting the stage for fall fires. Wildfires burn homes, cars, businesses, and it's not just wood smoke. Smoke storms appear to be regular summer-fall events, now affecting not only asthma patients, of which Pierce County has a relatively high percentage, but all of us to different degrees. The conflict between smoke protocol and COVID protocol was a real one for schools last fall. I'm a teacher and I had to deal with that. The heat dome from this June with 108 degrees Fahrenheit recorded at SeaTac caused 95 deaths across the state, 24 in Pierce County. It also severely impacted the shellfish industry with some smaller shellfish farms economically devastated by shellfish deaths. Pierce County was not prepared and had to act quickly to figure out how to protect our most vulnerable, the homeless and those with no access to air conditioning. Both increased rain events and wildfires make our slopes less stable, leading to landslides. We have a lot of sloping land above and below roads in Pierce County. Imagine if this were your car or you couldn't get home. Then we have the increase in air temperature, raising the temperature of our lakes, rivers, streams, and Puget Sound. We see more algae blooms impacting summer recreation, fish, and other wildlife. Salmon are cold water fish, and with rising temperatures are at risk for diseases and reduced reproduction. Now some trends as the concentration of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere rises. We will see major changes in river flows with single peak in the fall and no peak in the spring. That's the flooding cycle in the winter and drought or dry conditions in the summer. We'll see hotter temperatures in the summer and fewer frost days in winter, causing seasonal growing patterns to shift. More opportunity for insect infestations and changes in species that will call Pierce County home. This affects farming and the timber industry and our urban forests. We are likely to become rain dominant and see no to little snow. That affects skiing, summer water flows, electricity generation at our dams, and wildlife. This slide from 2015 gives a preview of what we might expect. In 2015, the temperature here was 2.7 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average. The snowpack was 70% below our normal 1970 to 1999 average, with results more than 250,000 salmon deaths, over 1 million acres burned to the tune of over 253 million in fire suppression, ski season 42% shorter at Stevens Pass and at Crystal Mountain, and 17 major crops with reduced yields causing over $633 million in losses. The IPCC scientists report extreme events will occur more often and be more intense as the average global temperature increases, even by what seems like small amounts, as this slide shows. For temperature, the heat dome is an example. Heavy precipitation will also become more common, bringing us back to flooding, landslides, and power outages. Awareness is growing. The Yale Climate Communications Program does polling to see where folks are in their thinking on climate change and climate action. Here in Pierce County, 62% are worried about global warming, 74% believe it will harm plants and animals, 73% believe it will harm future generations. 85% think research into renewable energy resources should be funded. 82% think there should be rebates for energy efficient vehicles or for solar panels, and 73% think carbon dioxide should be regulated as a pollutant. We know from this PSCA pie chart that reducing our greenhouse gas emissions means we must reduce emissions from the built environment and from transportation, particularly in light of a forecasted 50% increase in population by 2050. There are a number of big efforts underway in Pierce County to tackle climate change, including the Northwest Seaport Alliance with its clean air strategy, work by the Puyallup Tribe, and the Pierce County Sustainability Plan. It is an opportune time for climate collaboration, especially in helping smaller cities and towns in taking on climate actions that may well be out of their reach to do on their own. Even developing the climate sections in the required comprehensive plans could be the result of collaboration. The biggest need in doing the climate work is resources in knowledge, funding, and leadership. Pierce County has a lot of unshared knowledge from planners, nonprofits, local universities, and separate entities such as the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. Did you know that the assistant city manager of Lakewood used Google to get a free greenhouse gas inventory done? That also included information on vehicle miles traveled and a survey of rooftop availability for solar. Buying in bulk to replace potentially undersized stormwater conveyance systems or EV infrastructure or infrastructure to combat landslides and erosion across several towns could reduce costs. Sharing engineers, equipment, and ideas all can reduce cost. Defining common problems and solutions for a single grant proposal heightens the chances of the grant success. Your comprehensive plan could contain shared pieces built off of Vision 2050 and the Pierce County Sustainability Plan, relying on each city's planners' insights into their city's most pressing climate mitigation needs. Check out the Climate and Energy chapter of Lakewood's 2021 Comprehensive Plan. It's in your resource packet as a link. Actions taken do not need to be taken by all. Even Pierce County has regional differences with different climate challenges from seashore to lakes to rivers to farmland to urban areas. It makes sense to us to motivate collaboration for the benefit of comprehensive planning and climate projects in the context of the countywide planning policies, and to have GMCC take on a good chunk of the work, as you all have a seat at that table, but you may have other insights. The South Sound Housing Affordability Partnership is a potential model. Pierce County could add a library or a database of goals or comprehensive plans climate chapters so that you could all work from. Now is the right time for intensifying the work you do together on climate action. It's necessary, and federal funding, state funding, and county funding are all coming available now, and more may be on the way. We've included a list in your packet. Vision 2050 has climate directives. The Pierce County Sustainability Plan needs you to help achieve its bigger aims. Collaborate and reduce our collective emissions. Electrify transportation, beginning with the city fleet, and grow a clean transit system that includes Gig Harbor. Electrify the buildings, the technology is here. Maintain shoreline function and aim for no net loss. Consider gray water systems and solar in new development. Preserve the tree canopy and land stability with low impact development. By working together, you'll be taking care of your city and the health of your residents while also having a bigger impact within Pierce County. Climate Pierce County can help further conversations by listening, providing information, and helping to connect ideas between other jurisdictions. We're here to help. Thank you. And by the way, we have made presentations to other city councils as well as the PCRC. And we are looking for opportunities to share information because I know you don't always get the chance to talk. So we'd like to help with that process. I'm happy to answer questions. Looks like
All right,
everybody's really quiet.
Yeah, no, thank you. Councilmember Dinson.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Elly, for the presentation. During your presentation, it's just reminding me of a conversation that Councilmember Wook and I had right after I got elected, pre-COVID, and she and I were so excited that we were going to organize a local government environmental conference so that everybody could get together and talk about remember this, what we were doing. And we were excited because we could use our local hotels and conference areas, which would, obviously is good for our local economy, but that we could actually get together and figure out how we can collaborate, share best practices so that we're not all reinventing
Cool.
the wheel. And then COVID hit. I talked about it since. So I know that's something that I would be interested in reviving because it's so helpful to get together with our colleagues and so that we do things right the first time. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hines.
Yes, I sit on the PCRC as the Gig Harbor representative, and we've had a lot of discussion on this item, okay? And it revolves around the issue that you mentioned, called a lot of the smaller cities, and that includes Gig Harbor, don't have environmental experts on our staff, okay? That is where we are dependent on other organizations for that. And I think it begs some questions called, at what level, for example, at the county level, at the city level, at what level are these things being approached? And do we have what I would call a prioritized list of things by how much of a bang do you get for this much investment? For example, I killed CO2 or methane by this amount for this amount of an expenditure. That is, are we doing the big bang items first, or let's say pursuing those full bore, and some of the others will wait 5 years or something, I don't know. But that seems to be a key thing that I think everybody's grappling with, okay? The things that came down in Vision 2050 was a shopping list, but it didn't say where to start and where to end. It's just, there it is. Here's all these items you can work on. Well, I can't work on everything at the same time. So what can we do to prioritize these things? These are questions that I think PCRC, I know PCRC is grappling with right now, called how do we manage this thing? Okay, we've seen some of the proposals as far as actions go, but how to let's say make it specific to our jurisdiction, or does it even apply to our jurisdiction? We're completely out to lunch on that, particularly the small cities. We don't know what to do. Okay, put it that way. That's what we're grappling with. And it really gets to the point of what I call the should versus shall discussion. Because of this, there is concern and to some extent pushback called, hey, until we answer some of those questions, what makes me want to sign up to these kinds of things when I don't even know what I'm doing? Okay, so that's something that I think needs to be worked on. I'm not sure who should be working on that, but it's really a concern of the smaller towns and cities.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. And I think to some extent, it needs to be the smaller towns and cities getting together to see what can they do. So as we showed in the Pisgah pie chart, the big things are really emissions from transportation and from buildings. Okay, but climate mitigation is completely different depending on where your town is located. What do you have issues with? Do you have a shoreline that's at risk for sea level rise? What could you do about that? What do we do about the heat dome if that's going to be a repeated event? How are we going to keep our people cool and not have people die? Because 24 people dying in Pierce County because of a heat dome, that's not cool. So those are things that I would look at, and that's why the conversation needs to happen.
Okay, so under that type of an approach, for example, on the transportation side, which you mentioned was a big hitter, should we be saying, oh, the feds are going to take care of that, don't worry about it, guys. They will mandate something in terms of requirements and specifications for vehicles. All we have to do is incentivize or do something locally if we elect to make that happen. But as far as, we don't design vehicles, we don't do any of that. That type of thing. So we're kind of sitting back here saying, what can we do? And are we doing the right things? Okay, those questions are they're there. They're in everybody's mind called, now what's the right thing to do? So anyway, my comments, and I'd be interested as we go forward on how the county and the state are approaching this. To make a really worthwhile process.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Franich.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have a comment and a question. Just maybe for Dr. Elly, that if we would have got this information before the presentation, we could have digested it and maybe had a chance to be a little bit more informed, to come with a little bit better questions than we're prepared to ask after seeing a very quick presentation. So, and that leads me to my question. Is it you that if once we review this information, is it you that we contact, or the other gentleman that's here at the meeting, or?
Contact me. You will get the presentation. I'm going to make sure that it gets to Joshua, and he will make sure that you guys all get it. I'm sorry that we didn't get it to you earlier. We had some people traveling, and so we had to do some fine-minute tuning, and so that's why. Otherwise, I would have been happy to send it out earlier. And so then, yes, sure, send questions to me. My email is on the presentation, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilmember Wu.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Elly, thank you so much for being here this evening. And from your presentation, I think it's pretty clear that this needs to probably be worked on in our planning commission, and have that discussion there on what is applicable to Gig Harbor and how we can help do our little bit. We're a small town, but we can certainly join with others and do what we can do. So I'm certainly looking forward to the Planning Commission having a look at this and having more conversation with them as we go forward. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Elly. And there was, I don't know, let's see, the tenant, we had a caller that had a question, and maybe they'll comment under public comment. So if you want to stay on for part of our council meeting, that's great. We'll have public comment in about 5 minutes or so. But yeah, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And our third item tonight on presentation is Healthcare Heroes Month Proclamation. So Proclamation of the City of Gig Harbor, proclaiming the month of October 2021 as Healthcare Heroes Month in Gig Harbor, Washington. Whereas the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic and its progression in Gig Harbor and Pierce County continues to threaten lives and the health of our community as we experience an alarming increase in confirmed cases and hospitalizations, contributing to limited availability of beds in our local hospitals. And whereas as we work through the second year of the COVID-19 pandemic, the need for widespread vaccination is critical as new variation of the virus take hold. However, only 50% of Pierce County residents are fully vaccinated. And whereas the unified vision to protect life is embraced within our healthcare organizations, from the housekeeping, janitorial, and supported staff to the EMTs, nurses, doctors, and respiratory therapists. And whereas our healthcare professionals, first responders, and caregivers continue to dedicate themselves to alleviating pain and suffering of COVID-19 patients while risking their own lives and the well-being of their families. And whereas the mental health and the healthcare workers is suffering as an overwhelming majority of people hospitalized and dying from COVID-19 are not vaccinated, although many of these deaths were preventable with a vaccine. And whereas the responsibility, dedication, and fortitude of these devoted individuals to continue administering services in the face of danger and uncertainty serves as an inspiration to all. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the month of October 2021 is Healthcare Heroes Month. In Gig Harbor, Washington, and all residents are urged to offer their heartfelt gratitude through messages, letters, cards, donations, and support to our healthcare professionals for the commitment and sacrifice to continuing care for the sick during this difficult time. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Gig Harbor to be affixed this 27th day of September, 2021. Thank you, council, and thank you, citizens that brought this to our attention. Yes, Councilmember Wu.
Yes, thank you. So I was happy to sponsor this proclamation. And I just want to give a great big shout out to Bruce Kendall, who's president of the Pierce County Economic Board, because this was his idea, to have it come to all the cities and have our citizens and have a proclamation of supporting those frontline workers, every frontline worker, because they're getting tired and they need our support. And we just need to rejuvenate the support to them. So thank you especially to Councilmember Denson for being involved and for Mayor Kuhn for reading this. Thank you.
Thank you both. And I saw the email, Bruce. We'll get that signed to you tomorrow morning. So thank you. Okay, and that concludes the presentations. Under Mayor's report, we have appointment to SHAPE Executive Board. As you know, I participated as the city's representative to SHAPE Steering Committee over the last 2 years, and the original committee with Pierce County mayors for 2 years prior to that. SHAPE has been more formalized now through an intergovernmental agreement, and to date, 12 governments, this is fresh, 12 governments have approved the intergovernmental agreement and agreed to join SHAPE. Those 12 are Auburn, Fife, Gig Harbor, yay, Lakewood, Milton, Pierce County, Puyallup Tribe, Silicon, Sumner, Tacoma, and University Place. The cities of Fircrest and Edgewood are scheduled to take the votes within the next 2 weeks. Now, the first SHAPE Executive Board meeting will take place on October 18th, and recruitment and initial interviews are underway to hire the SHAPE Executive Manager. Our Community Development Director, Katrina Knudsen, has participated in this process. And for those that don't know, instead of each city trying to hire several staff members to work with attainable housing, over 12 cities to date are joining forces to hiring 1 and then 1.5 full-time employees to work together. So that way we don't have to duplicate and we can partner together. So now is the time for that oversight of SHAPE for the transition from the steering committee to the SHAPE Executive Board. So the approval of the interlocal agreement and the city's representative, we need a city's representative, and it can be a mayor, a city council member, or a city administrator. We need to establish our representative at this meeting. I know it takes years to achieve results, and I'm proud of being a part of creating the structure that will be followed for many years to come. I feel we need a representative that is here at least 4 years and is involved in the city on a daily basis. And with that, I've asked Councilmember Markley if she would accept representing the city with this committee, and she has accepted. So if there is no objection, I would like to see a show of support from council members to have Markley be our representative. And just raise your hand if you're supportive to that. Great. Thank you. Councilmember Markley, I've really enjoyed working with this group. It's actually been the mayors of Pierce County. It's kind of been like a family where they've actually, one big thing is we will get the same amount of votes as, say, Tacoma. And everyone, all the mayors that are part of this, were very, very polite and considerate. So I think you'll enjoy it very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for asking me. I'm looking forward to meeting this group of people and working with them. Most of you know this is an issue that is dear to my heart, and I'm looking forward to being a part of the solution for affordable housing in our community. So thank you. Thank you so much for your support as well, Council. I appreciate it.
Great. And Katrina, thank you for being part of the interview panel. And I'm sure you'll be working closely with who might be not Councilmember Markley, but Mayor Markley. So thank you very much. Okay, so it is time for the city administrator's report.
Thank you, Hunter. Want to give you a very brief update on our recruiting efforts. We did include a little bit of information in our bi-weekly updates last Friday. As you see, we have 9 recruitments that are in various stages of being completed. The most interesting one is the judge position, which we have interviewed for and made an offer to, and we are currently putting the last finishing touches on a proposed contract that will be coming to council. I believe we're going to be bringing that to council before the end of October. Parks manager, we've done 5 interviews so far. We have a couple more that we'd like to talk to. And then from there, we will move that down to 2 or 3 and bring them back in for a second round of interviews. And the first ones were done virtually. We are planning on doing the second round in person. Excuse me. The 2 IT positions are just about ready for interviews. We have got four finalists, I believe, for one of the positions, and we're trying to cut down the other one that has a lot of applications in it. I think 38 so far that have to be, or 38 more that have to be reviewed. So I think there was over 40 that applied for that position. And then we have a few upcoming recruitments: a senior planner, a utility billing technician, and unfortunately, HR assistant. The individual who was in that position for just a few months she chose to resign because she had some issues that she needed to deal with. So HR right now is down to the HR director, our payroll person, and then someone who was working half-time as a HR assistant, also working with our tourism folks. So we are scrambling and doing the very best we can with the very limited resources we have in HR. And that is my report, Your Honor.
Thank you, Tony. Councilmember Abersold.
Hey, Tony, can we have an update about where we are with the parks manager position?
Oh, I said that we had, I can't remember how many applications, 15 to 20. We brought in 5 individuals to interview. There are 2 others that applied that looked pretty good, so we want to talk with them as well. We're going to try to get that done this week or early next. And then those 7, we'll cut that down to 2 to 3, bring them back in for in-person interviews, and eventually get it down to 1 person we offer the job to. So I'm hoping to get that done by mid-October.
Thank you. Okay, so right before I open up the public comment on non-agenda items, I would like to address a couple of our new business items tonight. So I would like the public to be reminded that there is no public comment on what is now new business 1 and new business 3. These 2 council bills, the ESSHB 1220, Emergency Shelter and Housing and Ordinance, and 1467, imposing a 6-month moratorium on new lodging level 1 and short-term rental applications. So the time to comment on these items will be at the public hearing meeting for those two items. So the public hearing for these two items is on the October 11th council meeting at 5:30. So that is when it is best to have your comments, and that's when your comments will actually be recorded. So therefore, if you speak tonight on these items during non-agenda items, I'm not going to stop you, but they're not going to be part of the public hearing recordings on the 11th. That will be the time to have your concerns voiced. Councilmember Abersol.
I just want to say, I think we should always have public comment regardless. If it, takes up time, then it takes up time, but our meetings are recorded. So I think all the comments would be recorded. And I think that not having public comment is a bad look.
Well, this is actually directed from our attorney. So this is not coming from me. This is coming from our attorney.
I'm not putting any blame on anyone. I'm just saying it's a bad look.
Well, when you do a type of moratorium or emergency thing, you actually, the way cities have run is you don't take public comment on emergency moratoriums. You do it at the public hearing, but that's, this is not I'm not here to make this judgment. I'm here to follow the consistency of our law, and that's fine for you to voice that. Everyone has their own opinion. So thank you. With that, I will open it up for a public comment on non-agenda items. Everyone has 3 minutes, and you can give a comment by pressing the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, if you're calling in to the Zoom meeting by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 on your phone. And when using your phone to call in, you may need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Your name or the last 3 digits of your phone number will be called out when it is your turn to speak. And all speakers have to have 3 minutes to speak. And again, it's not a Q&A. And with that, I'll open it up. I'm glad I'm glad you're still here, Elly, because this caller had a question when you were here. Go ahead, Pete Weimiller, excuse me.
Thank you. It's Pete Waymiller. This is a public comment regarding Elly's presentation. Is that okay?
That is.
Okay, very good.
Can you say your address if you don't mind?
Yeah, no problem. Hi, my name is Pete Waymiller. I live at 10212 36th Street, Northwest Gig Harbor. And first, I can't thank you enough for protecting Gig Harbor's cultural treasures and natural resources when they became highly vulnerable during the rapid development in our area. Thank you for protecting the soul of the city I love and called home for 37 years. Now you are called on to mitigate an even greater threat to our natural resources and culture. This from climate change. Of course, the best approach is to identify and prioritize the local threats and then coordinate the mitigation between neighboring communities, making it a team effort. This is how Gig Harbor will get the most bang for their buck that Councilman Hines was describing earlier, from state and federal resources coming soon to combat this climate crisis. We just witnessed a larger drought followed by intense rainstorms or rain bombs. We're all seeing larger or longer wildfire seasons, and bigger fires are becoming more frequent. And we all saw how bare Mount Rainier was this summer. The evidence of climate change doesn't lie. You may have questions like, how is rising Puget Sound going to impact Gig Harbor's fishing industry? How will it impact hundreds of millions of dollars in Gig Harbor commercial waterfront? How about the same in private waterfront? Or other questions like, how will warming, rising, and acidifying Puget Sound impact Gig Harbor's fishing culture? How about the local shellfish industry? How will these impact our hatchery, our salmon streams, and estuaries that the city has worked so hard to restore while building partnerships with local tribes? How will Rising Bay impact the quality of our wastewater treatment, which Daryl mentioned earlier can be compromised by more saturation? I want to recognize Stephanie Lyle, the executive director of the Harbor History Museum, who has and will continue to offer valuable local historical data and witness testimony to best inform our climate decisions. My personal story is witness testimony from a private waterfront owner near Gig Harbor for 37 years. In the mid-'80s, we lived at Sunrise Beach, Second Landing, and later at First Landing. These were named after mosquito fleet destinations. There were many very old cabins on or near the water's edge at these sites. We became all too familiar with landsides from the many high clay banks near Gig Harbor and watched their threat increase over the years. At First Landing, we witnessed homes built in the 50s get hit by slides. The instability of these clay banks will only increase with extreme weather events and a rising Puget Sound, costing lives and hundreds of millions in real estate losses. We lived in Arletta since 1998, is also an old stop on the mosquito fleet. Our issues here are different. We now live on a low bank waterfront and can easily see how sea level rise will overcome our bulkhead in just a few decades. We already witnessed flooding and bank erosion when storms accompany king tides. But those who live on no bank property just down the beach have even greater risks and are already witnessing more flooding. Just down the road is Horsehead Bay and hundreds of millions more in private real estate. A climate resilience study by Pierce County in 2016 showed that floods will isolate dozens of these residents from the mainland. And we live on federally protected wetland for Chinook and resident orcas and a floodplain that actually floods, and sometimes across the only road that leads to Horsehead Bay. Perhaps the biggest threat to humans and private property in my area is that coming from saltwater intrusion into private wells. It just occurred to several wells up the beach. This is an event that is caused by lower hydraulic pressure from the well than the pressure from Puget Sound, and it results in saltwater intruding into the wells. These wells need to be abandoned because this condition is not reversible. The old-time hydrologists from this area warned us already that there was excessive water use in our area that was risking this condition. Increased development and longer droughts have both placed a higher demand on fresh water in Gig Harbor communities. In waterfront wells, this will reduce the hydraulic pressure needed to keep saltwater from intruding. That is gaining pressure from rising sea level.
So you're going to have to wrap it up soon.
Okay, thanks. I will. First of all, I'm a retired coach. I've lived here for 35 years, and I appreciate the importance of teamwork when facing a tough opponent. And I don't know of a more formidable one than climate change. And right now, Gig Harbor can stay ahead of the curve with the new strategies and new innovations and follow Elly's advice here and CPC, because they are the tip of the spear. This is our local team mitigating climate change right now for our local communities. So again, I want to thank you again for being part of maintaining a high quality when you took your turn stewarding Gig Harbor's highly treasured natural and cultural resources. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for waiting, Elly, and you too, Pete. Thank you. Yes, Marilyn, you're on. Yep.
Yes. Hello, good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Marion Barajikian. I am with Friends of Pierce County. I will keep my comments brief because I did send them to you today. Hopefully you received them.
Can you give our address, please?
Yes, it is 8205 90th Street Court Northwest, Gig Harbor 98332.
Thank you.
So I just would like to echo some of the things that Dr. Elly has already put forward. She has given you guys some great first steps to get you going on the right path. And I would like to say that the time for passing the buck and pushing it over to the feds or the state or whoever, that time is done. It's over. It's time for the city to step up, to do the right thing, and to take this climate crisis seriously. And any way we can help you to do that, let us know. We're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And caller 874.
Good evening, Mayor Kuhn. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the council, Mayor Kuhn, for allowing me to speak this evening. My concern this evening is a public records request that has been...
Tom, can you say your name and address, please?
Oh, I apologize. It's Thomas Wick, and it's Hunt Street Northwest here in Gig Harbor, 98335.
Thank you.
And so anyway, the public records request was submitted September 25th, 2020. And I'm going to, there was a council person comment at the last city council meeting, something about fishing expeditions and requests for public records. So I'm going to read this request for public records verbatim, and I would like the council to either on the record or off the record debate whether this was a fishing expedition or not. So number one, these are listed in order. A copy of the attached Gig Harbor request for public records form to include a copy of this email within which the public records sought are identified with specificity. And well, I won't go into the city's response, it's not important. Please provide a copy of any and all communications exchanged between myself and all City of Gig Harbor employees to include all elected officials. If attachments were included within the exchanged emails, please ensure they are also included. Number 3, please provide a copy of any and all communications exchanged between the city and any other persons and/or entities that are in any way associated with the stormwater runoff and drainage on parcels 022-118-2012 and parcel 022-118-2000. Number 4, please provide copies of any and all documents associated with the blank. I'm purposely leaving the name of this housing development out of this public record. Housing development's retention pond outlet being plugged after the city voted to approve final plat. To clarify, after final plat approval, I observed a plug with a rope attached to it in the outlet pipe. I included Mr. Langhelm and Mr. Ward in this email, as I have to assume that if a retention pond located within Gig Harbor city limits is going to have its outlet plugged, they would know by whose order and the circumstances that warranted this action. Number 5, please provide a copy of the city issued permit that was issued to remove and replace the 24-inch diameter concrete pipe that was located under Hunt Street Northwest. It was the only 24-inch diameter pipe located in the immediate vicinity of this intersection of Hunt Street Northwest and Scansey Avenue. Number 6, please provide a copy of the city inspector's documentation where he approved and signed off on the installation of the 24-inch diameter pipe that required removal and replacement just a few years after it was installed, secondary to being grossly out of alignment. The 24-inch diameter pipe that was and that continues to remain located under Hunt Street Northwest. And this document was signed, well, Mr. Larson did respond to this, and he informed me that the records would be, the second release would be November 30th, 2020. I reached out to the city on September 16th and requested an invoice for the last $100 that I gave the city to complete this public records request. I gave the city a total of $300, and I never received an invoice for the last $100 that I sent them. And on August 23rd, 2021, I got an email from your current administrator saying that I would have this public records request completed on or about September 13th, 2021. So this records request would take about 1 hour to complete. And I would just like the council to have a discussion either on the record or off the record regarding this issue. Thank you, Mayor Key, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the council.
Thank you. Are there any other callers that wish to talk on something not on the agenda? And okay, and Tony, I forgot to ask you, were there any written comments that came in?
Actually, yes, Ms. Barajikian did submit something in writing, but she testified, so I don't think there's any need to read this.
Okay, thank you. I will close the public comment period for non-agenda items, and we will proceed to old business. Our first item tonight on old business is second reading and adoption of Ordinance 1465, updating GHMC 2.52 public records. The report is our interim city clerk, Josh Decker.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. This is back for second reading. It's Ordinance 1465. This is just updating our administrative policy for how we respond to public records requests. As we talked about at the last meeting on September 13th, we are changing a few things in here. One of them deals with the amount of time that staff commits on a weekly basis to responding to records. And then there's another change in here that details how we respond to the order in which we respond to public records requests. Both of these changes are meant to make sure that we're responding efficiently to all requesters and that we're not spending so much time on records requests that we're neglecting our other essential functions. One action, this agenda item includes the action to adopt the ordinance, and there's also a secondary action to repeal an administrative policy that was adopted in 2016. That policy is largely redundant to the ordinance, and just for streamlining purposes, we're recommending that we repeal that entirely because it's going to be completely superseded by the new ordinance. So if there are any clarifying questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Okay, Councilmember Franich.
Yes, thank you, Josh. Can you just briefly describe what that administrative section is that you just talked about?
Yeah, that policy was adopted by council in 2016. It was just adopted as a policy, not by resolution or by ordinance. In 2017, council came back and actually modified this chapter of the code to include most of that policy. So the policy and the code chapter, the way it was before we're revising it today, are almost verbatim the same. Now that we're making some additional changes to the code chapter, they're going to be out of sync, and there's really no need to have an administrative policy when it's already written in the code.
Thank you.
Councilmember Eversole.
Yeah, Josh, we heard, or I guess my question was, what is the average amount of time that gets spent on, say, an average record request? And I know that there is probably no such thing as an average, but what, you get a request and how much time does that take to process?
It would be hard to nail down an average for each one, but I think that probably about 80% or more take us less than 15 minutes to do. So that the average records request is going to be fairly simple. There's definitely there's going to be outliers that are going to take a considerable amount of time longer than that. But if you kind of weed out those outliers, then you're looking at maybe 30 minutes on average per request.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hines.
Yeah, I had a question relative to information technology, search capability in particular, Carl. And I assume that you utilize a lot of search capability to perform these things. And the question is, do we have adequate tools at our disposal to do this? And can these tools be used so that the public can search for things? For example, I have played some games with our system where I knew the answer. I knew where it was. I actually knew where it resided, what it was. I knew what the keywords were. I put it into our search capability on the Gig Harbor page, homepage, couldn't find it. No record, no such record. Wait a minute, I know it's there. So my question is, do we have adequate capability to do these kind of things, or should we be looking at upping our search capability for these type of things?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And what we have right now, we've migrated from 3 different platforms for hosting our council meetings and our resolutions and agendas over the last, it's been over the last 4 years. So our records are searchable on our website, but not in a very intuitive way. We have the capability to make it a lot more streamlined and a lot more efficient. And when the clerk's department is back up to full staff, that's going to be one of our top priorities, is to get that everything transferred over into one system on our website. So when you go to our website and you click on that bar that says, what can we help you find? Everything's going to pop up in that. We are not there yet, but we have that capability. The second part is for our responding to records requests. We have pretty good technological function to search internally in our records. We can't make that public because a lot of our records, well, not a lot, but we do have exempt records that we can't disclose to the public. So those, even though we have search capability to search those rapidly and find the records we're looking for, there's still an element of manual review where we have to go through each one of those and make sure we're not disclosing something that's confidential or something that could compromise our citizens. So that's something we have to keep in mind when we're doing our searches. So the technological capability is there, but there still is that human element that we have to rely on.
What percentage of your searches involve confidential material? Just out of curiosity.
The big trigger is email. Anytime you want to search of email, we can search keywords, but that's where all the confidential stuff is going to lie. It's going to be just that email that's comes up in the search that you may not have thought would be triggered, and it's sitting in there, and you've got to review each one individually to make sure you catch it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I don't see other clarifying questions. So we will open it up for public comment. I do have to say, Mr. Wick, I see your hands raised, but you just commented on this on non-agenda items. That's what you did for about 3.5 minutes is just comment on this. So I will give you 30 seconds if you want more, but you know, you just commented on this on a non-agenda item. So I'm going to be courteous to give you 30 seconds. Go ahead, Thomas Wick. This is on we're having open public comment right now on new business item 1. Mr. Wick.
Yes, Mayor Kuhn, before you cut me off the 30-second mark, I actually have specific comments. I would like to use my full 3 minutes regarding what I just heard. Not,
But that, no, I'm
something-
sorry, that would be giving someone 6 minutes. I'm not going to do that. That's not what we do. You spoke for.
my comment on under the general public comments was under the City of Big Harbor's failure to produce a specific public records request. It had nothing to do with your ordinance. They're separate issues. I'm entitled to 3 minutes. In fact,
Daniel,
I
would
don't
you
even want to.
clarify? Would you give me some direction, Daniel?
Well, I haven't heard his comments on this comment section, but if the prior comments were about a public records request and these comments are about this ordinance, I think those are separate and that would be focused on this, assuming that happens. So full time would seem appropriate for ordinance specific comments.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Wick.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Kenny. I appreciate you stepping in there. So I heard Councilman Himes. He asked the question, and I really appreciate if he would step in and make sure that I don't misquote him. But he asked the question, do we have the ability and the tools to do these, to do public records requests? And my translation is his question was, do we have the ability and the tools to comply with the Public Records Act? Because when a citizen comes forward and makes a request for public records, to not provide them timely and to use the excuse that the city lacks the ability or the tools to comply would be a no deal from the get-go. So if Mr. Himes or Councilman Himes could comment on, give some clarity on that, I would appreciate it. And the other issue is the city is right at this point not able to produce public records timely. And my concern is this ordinance is going to push the city's ability to comply with the PRA even further back. So if a citizen can't get public records timely, I think it would be inconsistent with the Public Records Act for the mayor and city council to enact legislation that would reduce staff's time even further to comply with requests for public records. The other issue that was mentioned was regarding emails and confidentiality. Some emails, and I'm not going to mention my public records request and get the mayor all riled up. But if a request for public records is a request for countless emails exchanged between a private citizen in the city of Big Harbor, and because they were already exchanged, there's no privileges that an attorney can quote to say, we can't give those to you because they're private, they're confidential, because they've already been sent, they've already been exchanged. So that's something that's problematic for me. And that's something I would like to, again, the city council to have a discussion about either on the record or off the record before they vote to enact this ordinance that is just going to make it that much more difficult for the city to comply with the PRA. And I thank the city's attorney for allowing me to speak on this evening. Thank you, Mayor Kuhn, and ladies and gentlemen of the council.
Thank you. I will let council speak, but this is public comment, and I'm not sure, but go ahead, Councilmember Wu.
So have we finished with public comment?
No, we haven't.
I'll
go
wait
ahead?
until we're finished with public comment.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak that's on the computer or phoning in? Tony, did we have any written comments on old business number 1?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. I will close the public comment and refer back to council. Councilmember Wu.
Yes, I move to approve ordinance number 1465 and repeal administrative policy A-16-01.
Second.
Okay, so for clarification, just one moment. Okay. Council comments, Councilmember Franich.
Thank you. I do plan on supporting this tonight, but I am a little leery of setting this artificial, or well, it's not artificial, setting a hard limit of 8 hours on public records requests. So I'm just hoping that this isn't an item that we pass tonight and future councils just don't forget about this item. And if the reason I'm going to support it is because if the public doesn't believe that in general, which I believe in general, we are providing proper timeliness, that this can always be addressed at a later date. So that's really the only reason why I'm supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hines.
Yeah, I share Councilmember Frenich's concern there. It seems to me we ought to establish as an integral part of this some kind of a checkpoint downstream, okay? And I would propose 6 months to be exact. Therefore, I would offer an amendment to basically have a check at 6 months after passage of this thing, assuming it passes, to see how we're doing, okay, with this. That is, what does the wait list look like? Are we keeping pace with what's coming in?
I second that.
Okay, so we have amendment to it. I think staff can figure out how to monitor without more clarity, what has come in that 6 months and what has not been filled, and be able to follow that. So there's a amended motion. There's a second. We will go a little bit more in the discussion. Councilmember Abersol, you haven't spoken yet. I'm going to let you go first before Councilmember Hines.
I want to just get reclarification on what Councilmember Hines' amendment was, because I was thinking and listening at the same time and didn't all rattle around in here. And then I would just say that, the public, when they do public records requests, I don't think they understand what effort has to go into that. I myself have done them, and it can take months to get all the information back. And, when I put in my request, I didn't think I was asking something that would take months, but it does. So I just don't think that the public is really aware, even when they make what they feel is a simple request, they don't understand really how much work has to go into that request and how many different files are going to get searched, things like that. So I think there's a perception by the public that needs more education on, and that's all I'll say. So if we could just get clarification on what Councilmember Hines' amendment was.
Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Hines. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, here I am. In all good processes, you set a goal out there and you check to see how you're doing. Okay, here we're making a major change policy-wise. Okay, that we are going to limit activity based on a fixed number of hours, not on completion of searches or anything like that. And I think it would be very worthwhile, particularly from the citizens' perspective and people who are requesting this, to say, is this working? Is it working for us? Where do we stand on this? And by the way, I'll go back to my prior comments. If it's not working, what are we going to do about it? And in particular, I will ring the chimes for IT. Artificial intelligence eats this kind of stuff up. This is their meat. They go after this like billions of records, okay? Searching for needles and haystacks. They're very good at it. And to me, something like that would be an appropriate response if we're not meeting what we think is required for the citizens. So that was my intent there, Councilmember Eversole. Hey, you can't just pass something and say, okay, well, we'll forget about that for a while. I think you have to say, okay, did we make the appropriate action? And if we did, and we still want to continue with this, what do we have to do to improve, for example, our response time? And does it fall in the IT arena? I think it does.
Okay, so it would be amendment to come back basically at the end of March, which is just a hair over 6 months, with an update from staff as how it's worked. So we have a second. Do we have any more discussion before we vote on the amendment? Okay. I guess I'm going to do a roll call on this just to make sure we get it all right. We're voting on the amendment that Councilmember Himes said. All those in favor say aye. Start with Councilmember Franich.
Aye.
Councilmember Denson.
Aye.
Councilmember Markley.
Aye.
Councilmember Wook.
Aye.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Himes.
Aye.
Councilmember Eversole.
Aye.
Okay. We will now, if there's no objection, we will go to the original motion. Okay, all those in favor on the original motion with it being amended, Councilmember Franich.
Aye.
Councilmember Denson.
Aye.
Councilmember Markley.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Himes.
Aye.
Councilmember Eversole.
Aye.
Okay, so where are you? Let's see. Tony, would you work with Josh? I'd like to have 2 people. So there's, oversight on this. I don't want the person that's doing the public records, filling the public records request, which is mostly Josh, to be just the only person, showing the follow-up, because for clarity and for non-bias. So would you work with Josh to come up with some formula of seeing how, when they come in and how long it takes to get them fulfilled based upon, the depth of it. And then, obviously pass that same knowledge on to the future city administrators, so we can come back the first council meeting, maybe write this down, first council meeting, Josh, in March with an update.
We can do that.
Great. Okay, I think that's a good decision, council. I think you did a good job with that. And that's Council Bill 1, and we will move to Old Council Business 2, which is lease agreement with the Chamber of Commerce. Our report tonight is from our interim city administrator, Tony Pasecki.
Thank you, Your Honor. In late June of this year, the City Council was presented with a lease with the Chamber of Commerce for the building that they use both for their office and that we use as our visitor center. Council adopted that lease. It was presented to the Chamber and they continue to have questions about it. So I've sat down with them all over Zoom, by the way, to go through their concerns and see if we can work them out. And over the course of 3 or 4 different meetings, we were able to figure those things out. And I'd just like to give you a quick summary of what they are and then answer any questions. The first item that the Chamber was concerned about was the definition of maintenance and repair in the lease. They thought it was a little bit vague. They wanted to make sure that they would be held responsible for things that they were responsible for, in other words, damage that they caused, but that the city would be repairing things that were just part of owning a building. As buildings age, systems start to break. So water pipe breaks, or electrical panel has a problem, or a ballast in a light needs to be repaired. Those sort of things are just normal wear and tear, things that the city should be responsible for. So I drafted some language and they were happy with it. Second thing they were concerned about was the language in the lease that clearly outlined what the city's recourse is if they don't perform. But the lease wasn't specific as to what the Chamber's recourse was if the city didn't perform. So we added a little bit of language with to that effect. basically language that appears in the Landlord Tenant Act, and they seem to be happy with that. They commented that the roof needs to be replaced or repaired, and the HVAC system needs to be replaced and repaired. And we've talked about this for a while. And what I agreed to is that we would put money into the budget for next year, and that both of those items would be looked at and either replaced or repaired by June 30th. And finally, the last item that they were concerned about had to do with the rent. We talked through that quite a bit. And essentially what had happened is for 10 years, the city had not increased the rent. The base that they were paying was $500, which is 25% of the fair market value from 11 years ago. We had the opportunity to increase the rent, but we chose not to. Excuse me. So what we did is we inflated the rent. Actually, what we did is we inflated the fair market value of what the rent should be if they were renting the entire building. And then we applied the same formula that we had to determine what they would actually pay, which is they would pay 50%, since half of it was our operation or our things that were going on for us, and 50% that was for their offices. And then we reduced that again by 50% because they were providing staffing at the visitor center. So essentially they're paying 25% of the fair market rent. We also then put in a CPI inflator. So in the future years, the rent would simply go up by CPI. And we worked that through, and they are happy with that as well. So I am prepared to answer any questions you might have. And at this time, I recommend the council approve this for lease. And by the way, the chamber has already signed it, and all it's waiting for is the mayor's signature.
Great. Thank you very much for that hard work too. I know Tony, Bob started that and you finished it. So any clarifying questions from council? Okay. I will open up for public comment. Were there any written comments turned in, Tony?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Are there any callers that wish to comment on the lease agreement with the chamber, which is old business number 2? Okay, I will close the public comment period and proceed to look for action from council. Council, I'm sorry, you got the sunset in the corner where your hand is. It's really hard to see. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yes, I'd just like to praise City Administrator Bisecki for his skill at negotiating this. It wasn't good. I felt a little bit bamboozled, and yes, I did vote for it the first time, but I'm glad you brought it back to 0, Tony, and started from there. Good job, and I'm going to support this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that support, would you like to do a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that. I see, I don't have it right in front of me. Can I just say that they authorize the mayor to sign the lease agreement with the Chamber of Commerce as negotiated by City Administrator?
Sure. And located at 3125 Judson Street. That sounds great.
Yes.
Councilmember Himes.
Second.
Okay, sorry, Councilmember Eversole. Okay, there's a second. Without looking for any discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion passes 7-0. And we are now moving on to new business. The fourth item will Councilmember Eversole.
Yeah, can we take a 5-minute break?
Sure. We will see you all just a minute or two, a couple minutes after 7. Great. We have returned to our council meeting of Monday, September 27th. The time is 7:03. Our next item is new business item 4 that we're actually doing first, which is a first reading and adoption of Ordinance 1467, imposing a 6-month moratorium upon the acceptance of new lodging level 1 and short-term rental applications. Our report tonight is from our Community Development Director, Katrina Knudsen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually going to turn it over to Principal Planner Carl DeSimas. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Carl.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Katrina. Good evening, members of council and the public. As noted, for council's consideration this evening, I am presenting ordinance number 1467 relating to short-term rentals and the city's lodging level 1 land use classification. I'd like to begin by really clearly framing the question at hand that's before you this evening, and that is, should the city stop taking in applications for proposed lodging level 1 uses while staff and council draft regulations specific to short-term rentals? Or should the city continue to take in applications for lodging level 1 while staff and council draft regulations specific to short-term rentals? Stated more plainly, are we going to enact a moratorium on accepting new applications for lodging level 1 or not? On September 7th, the Planning and Building Committee took up a discussion regarding short-term vacation rentals, their rise in popularity regionally and within our city limits, and our current regulations for permitting them. This discussion led to a motion directing staff to draft the ordinance that is before you this evening. As noted in the agenda bill, the Gig Harbor Municipal Code currently does not define short-term rental as a standalone use. Therefore, it has been placed under the lodging level 1 definition and use classification. However, this use classification is not broad enough to capture all types of short-term rentals and provide for a clear permitting path. The issue needs further study and public process to ensure we have a comprehensive approach around regulations and permitting for this type of use. Again, the question before council tonight is whether or not the city should stop accepting applications for lodging level 1 uses and thereby short-term rentals while the issue is fully analyzed through a public process. Ordinance number 1467 would provide for a 6-month moratorium on the receipt and processing of new applications for lodging level 1 uses. In order to adopt the ordinance this evening, a majority of the council +1 would need to vote in favor. If this ordinance is passed tonight, the city is required to hold a public hearing within 60 days of its adoption. Mayor, this concludes my presentation, and I am available to take any questions I might be able to answer.
Right, and just to clarify, I had said that the public hearing is actually scheduled for the first council meeting in October, which I believe is October 11th. Is that correct?
It would be, Mayor, yes, if the ordinance is adopted this evening.
Okay, so we're doing it well within the 6-month period of time. Great.
Sorry, just to clarify, Mayor, it would be within 60 days of the adoption of the ordinance.
Thank you. Councilmember Markley.
Yes, thank you. Carl, I just had a clarifying question on page 2 of 5 of new business 4. At the very top of the page where it's letter B, short-term rental does not include any of the following. And then my question is about item 3 listed. A dwelling unit or portion thereof that is operated by an organization or government entity that is registered as a charitable organization with the Secretary of State of Washington, or is classified by the Federal Internal Revenue Service as a public charity or a private foundation, and provides temporary housing to individuals who are being treated for trauma, injury, or disease, or their family members. Is that going to in any way conflict with new business item number 3 that talks about the interim zoning for transitional housing and things like that? In reading all of this, this is the only thing that jumped out as a possible conflict between the new laws passed by the state of Washington and us putting a moratorium that may have to be amended. This may be the only portion that may have to be left out if it conflicts with the new legislation. If it doesn't, then we're all good. But that stuck out to me, and I wanted to just ask if you had come across that, or what your thoughts were about just that one particular section.
Thank you, Councilmember Markley. I think that's a really good point and a great question. I think what that's saying is that that type of dwelling unit would not be included as a short-term rental.
That's how I was reading it. I just wanted to make sure that that's actually the case, and
Yeah.
that by us putting a moratorium on this, that wouldn't conflict with, with what we need to do state-wise.
I don't believe that it would, but I see Katrina has unmuted herself, so I'll let her speak to that since she's presenting the 1220 stuff.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that
Carl.
sounds great. And Daniel looks like his ears are buzzing too, so.
I'm trying to cause trouble. I'm just needing to
Oh,
clarify.
it's great. It's a very good thing to make sure.
A good clarifying question, Councilmember Markley. I agree with Carl's reading of this. It would, the short-term rental does not include section 3, which is the dwelling unit used for those purposes. So the two would not conflict.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Hines.
Yeah, the way it's written right now, it focuses on a potential land use code change. And we've gotten input from some members of the community that maybe a business license might be a better way to go. Is there anything in here that would preclude us from looking at a business license approach as an alternative to a code change?
Thank you, Councilmember Himes. Well, the ordinance before you tonight is really just simply imposing a moratorium on the receipt of any new applications at this time, so that for the next 6 months, so that we have an opportunity to run a public process, hear from the public on what if any regulations are needed in order to regulate short-term rentals, as opposed to lumping them in with lodging level 1. Right now, they're lumped in with lodging level 1. And so our only recourse at the moment is to put a pause on those and study the issue to figure out what regulations are needed moving forward. Did that answer your question? I'm sorry if I missed it.
Yeah, is there any, I guess the question is, would there be any misunderstanding going forward if business license is not mentioned in here as an alternative we're looking at that would preclude it? And I guess, Daniel, I'll look to you to an answer on that one. Otherwise, I would just say, hey, call it legislation. It could be any of the above and go from there.
So thank you for the opportunity. The moratorium before you tonight would not dictate what your next steps may look like. And so you'll go through a process that will generate ideas, you'll vet those and come to your decision on how you want to address this moving forward. And that'll be in a separate action. So this would not confine what that separate action may be.
Okay.
Great. So it just really gives us the time. We're not deciding one way or the other on anything. It just gives us a complete time to really study all of our alternatives and all of our options.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it doesn't get locked out by exception.
Right. No. Councilmember Jensen.
Yes, I have two questions. The first, Carl, is if a property is already permitted as a short-term rental, or if they're in the process of being permitted, if they've applied and they're working their way through the system, how will a moratorium affect them? Will they be allowed to proceed? Can the rules change? How will this affect them if it's passed tonight?
This moratorium would not have any effect on any existing short-term rentals, and it would not have any effect directly on applications that are in process.
Okay. My second question is, I appreciated the two questions you posed to council as the reason why we're here tonight. But I think that there's a third question, and that's whether or not this is an emergency, because an emergency ordinance like this circumvents initially the public process of our normal process of first and second reading. So my question is, why is this an emergency, and why can't we have a first and second reading to determine whether we need a moratorium?
Councilmember Jensen, the direction that was given to staff from the Planning and Building Committee was to put this forward as a as a moratorium, which instigates an emergency. And so staff were following the direction that we were provided for by the Planning and Building Committee.
Okay, at some point, do we have to defend this emergency definition to the public as to why we took this action? Precluding some of their rights is arguably
I think
without
we've had,
any public input.
yeah, I think that's Daniel. I think he's given us direction.
Well, yeah, if I may. So if we need to, if we go too far into some of these details, we might have to have an executive session, or we can talk about it offline. But there are two things that are happening at the same time. You have a moratorium, and then you have an emergency effective date. Those are they obviously it's in the same thing and they're working together, but they are not the same thing. And so the moratorium has the public process. It's a required public hearing to adopt a moratorium or an interim zoning control that must happen within 60 days. And you have to have findings, goes for 6 months. That's the structure of either a moratorium or an interim zoning ordinance. In addition to that, you can have an emergency ordinance. An emergency ordinance is effective immediately rather than waiting the 5 days. That requires a majority +1 of council to adopt. And so you could have a moratorium without an emergency ordinance. The reason that it was included was per request, and also to make sure that you don't have lots of projects and things coming in seeking to use the old standards in that interim period of time. It's the 5 days between adoption and it's 5 days after publication. So in that gap. And so the idea is to, if you're truly trying to put a pause on it, that you would do that so that people don't take actions, possibly vest to the old standards, get applications in, things like that. And then what you've done isn't as effective. Your pause on everything that you're doing isn't as effective. You could, if council doesn't feel comfortable with that and doesn't feel like that is supported, you could not do it as emergency. It would be effective 5 days after publication, assuming it were passed. You don't need the majority +1 because it's not an emergency, but it's really not. It's not related to the. It's not related to the public process. That public hearing process is related to the moratorium itself, not the emergency provision. So it'll be up to council to decide whether or not the emergency is supported and necessary. And if you vote for it as emergency, you're supporting that for those reasons and others that you may bring up. And if you want to remove that, then it just creates a gap in time from when it is adopted to when it is effective.
But then you may have a run on the bank, basically, like you already have a little bit, right?
That's certainly potential, and it's a conditional use in certain zones, and it's permitted in other zones. So it's just I can't hypothesize how it may or may not get used by the public. But the idea is, if you want to freeze it and you're worried about that, and you want to make sure that when you're going in to analyze it and create possibly changes to this, that you don't have to account for this other stuff going on.
Thank you. Okay, council. Let's see. Where did you have a question, Councilmember Rodenberg?
I did, and then City Attorney Kenny answered it, and then I had another one, and he answered that again. So
okay.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Just want to make sure you had your turn. Councilmember Himes.
I just a comment. This is very similar to what we did in 2018. Many of us remember that experience where we basically froze permits for 6 months because of exactly the same issue. That is, the moment we declare it, all kinds of applications will come in, and there'll be arguments over vesting and all kinds of stuff like that. And therefore, I think that went reasonably well, and I'm supportive of the 6 month moratorium because of that. We've done it once, and it seemed to have worked, and therefore we should consider it again.
If we do pass this, we will work out a set of work study sessions so that, you know, we don't cram something towards the end. So we stay within what we did last time and really follow through with this so that all of our citizens know that we're, you know, keeping our word on the 6 months. And we didn't extend the last one, and we would work hard. I would schedule the meeting with staff and council to make study sessions. So Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yeah, I guess now we're actually in council deliberation as well as clarifying, since there's no public comment. If that's true, then I support this 100%, and I do feel that it's an emergency for all the reasons stated already, as far as a rush on the bank. So I think we got some letters. Council got letters today from the public, both pro and con. And I think that alone shows that there's enough comment and enough issues that we don't have answers for, that we do need to study this in those work sessions. So I'm in favor of passing this tonight.
And Councilmember Franich.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I believe it is appropriate that we take the time to look at this and determine if we need to take any action at all. At the end of the 6 month, after the public process works its way out and we become a little more educated on the pros and cons of these short-term rentals, then we will decide whether or not we're going to take any action. But I think it's important that we take the time to look at this. So I'm going to support it.
Councilmember Denson.
I have another question. So, of course, yeah, because I've never been through this process and it just makes me really uncomfortable. It's not that I don't agree with a lot of what's been said. I absolutely know that we need regulations and we need to talk about what's right for our community and all of that, but I'm struggling with the lack of public process. So once we have the public hearing at the beginning of October, and then we have study sessions and we work through all of the things that need to be worked through with these short-term rentals. And then would we have staff come to council with a regular first reading bill that we would have to deliberate and get public comment on, just like normal, and second reading, then we would pass whatever we've decided is a good idea. And the public would have that opportunity to weigh in and kind of close to normal after the moratorium, or as it's ending. Is that the way it will work?
I think like we did before, we would actually have all that wrapped up by the end of the 6 months.
Okay.
Mayor, may I?
Sure.
Councilmember Dunson, to answer your question, the public hearing, if this passes, would be, the first one would be October 11th. We would welcome all public to come and testify to council. We go through our normal noticing protocol, including the website, newspaper, etc. At that meeting, the council will need to provide findings, essentially what we want to study, kind of what the general plan is. I think Carl has stated that staff would recommend utilizing the Planning Commission in order to provide a recommendation to council. There would be, if council allows that route, we would want to have work sessions and public hearings that the public would be invited to. The Planning Commission would then provide a recommendation on proposed path to the City Council, and then it would come forward for first reading and second reading through our normal ordinance processing procedure.
Okay. And during the Planning Commission meetings, is public comment welcome at those meetings as well?
It is.
Thank you.
But because this is such an important subject, this would not be, a planning committee discussion only. This would be a discussion with all of staff, all of council, as well as the public.
That's correct, Mayor. The staff are recommending this go to the Planning Commission, our volunteer body that looks at planning issues, in order to look at we've received many different comments about ways that we could approach this. And so what we hope is that the Planning Commission can work those through and provide a recommendation to the City Council prior to the council process. And then once it would get to council, council could choose to have work sessions, or we could go straight into first and second reading, whichever is preferable to the council.
Okay, and we would study other similar cities like Paulsbo or Bainbridge Island and see what instead of reinventing the wheel, what other cities have done to learn from that.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, any other council comments? Okay, as we said, we need a majority plus one, so that would be 5 votes. I'd like to look for a council member to put a motion forward, if that's what they choose. Council Member Himes.
Yeah, I'll move to approve ordinance 1467, establish an interim moratorium on whatever we call this thing. Hold on a second here. On short-term rentals.
And then adoption at first reading.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, sorry, it's actually in a technical sense, it is the receipt and processing of lodging level 1.
Okay.
So I would just say for ordinance 1467. It's all in the title.
That'll work. Okay.
Okay, Councilmember, is there a second?
I second.
Okay. I'm going to do another roll call. Vote by call. All those in favor say aye. Councilmember Franich.
Aye.
Councilmember Denson.
Aye.
Councilmember Markley.
Aye.
Councilmember Woog.
Aye.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
Aye.
Councilmember Himes.
Aye.
Councilmember Aldersold.
Aye.
Okay. I think it's so the motion passed 7-0. I think it's probably best, and it's set soon, to wait for our council meeting on the 11th. And then at that time, we will have already talked to planning, and we'll schedule a series of study sessions and not wait till the end of the year, so that we finish, and we'll kind of work backwards. We'll work with Carl and Katrina to see when 6 months ends and work backwards, so we make sure that we get all those steps that have to be completed and done prior to that. All right, so now we're back to our normal schedule program, which is new business item 2, which will be first reading of ordinance ROW land acquisition NCGH LLC property donation at 96th Street. The report tonight is from Director Jeff Langhelm.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'm just going to share with you on my screen so we all know what property we're talking about here. But the ordinance, first reading of the ordinance presented to you tonight, as the mayor said, is for a property donation that was proposed by North Creek Gig Harbor LLC. So as you can see on the screen, this is the area of 96th and Burnham Drive. There is a property here. I'm going to zoom in to it. This is the property we're referring to. It is about a little under 1/3 of an acre. So the city purchased the adjacent parcel here next to it back in 2019. It took part of the original parcel that we're talking about here today, and the city purchased this new parcel to create access, and because of an issue with surveying related to the Cushman Trail construction. The property owner afterwards elected to go ahead and just donate the remainder of the property, which is the parcel highlighted in teal, to provide that to the city for park purposes. So at this point, the city, in order to accept the donation, must authorize the acceptance through ordinance. So that's the ordinance you have here tonight. We have looked at and reviewed the property purchase checklist that has been adopted by council by policy. And we have completed the items that are relative to this property purchase. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Okay, I don't see any questions. We will open it up for public comment. Tony, were there any comments that were sent in or emailed to the city?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, any callers wish to comment on the item of discussion? Okay, I will close the public comment. And do I have a motion to present forward by council?
This is just a first reading.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Unless there's any comments, we'll just bring this back for second reading at the October 11th meeting.
Perfect. Sorry, trying to look at too many different things. All right, great. We're going to go on to new business number 3, which Public Works contract lift station number 12. You're on again. Public Works Director Jeff Langhelm.
All right, thank you, Mayor. The requested Public Works contract award that you have before you tonight would completely rehabilitate the city's sewer lift station number 12. Sewer lift station number 12 is located right at the intersection of Burnham Drive and Woodhill Drive, just west of Highway 16. This lift station was originally constructed in the late 1980s, and it serves a majority of the Gig Harbor North area. It includes all of Borgen Boulevard that is west of Harbor Hill Drive, Canterwood Boulevard, including the hospital and Canterwood Estates, the Purdy area, and the area that is in and around Horizon West, just south of the intersection here. You know, we've seen many times this year the Public Works contracts that come in well above the anticipated budgeted amount, and this is another one of those projects that came in above the budgeted amount. Most recently, we saw Public Works contract bids coming in for lift station 6 that were well above the anticipated budgeted amount. So once again, staff does recognize that this project is looking to cost the city a lot more than we anticipated. We do feel, though, that the 6 bids that we received validated the budget validated the low bidder based on the fact that we had quite a range of bids as shown in the council bill. It's not easy to accept, but at this point, we continue to recommend that we proceed with this project. Also, this council bill requests approval of a consultant services contract. That consultant services contract has a scope and fee for what we consider worst case scenario. In other words, if the construction supervisor that the city typically would put on a project like this is not able to perform daily inspections because of too many tasks and being pulled in too many different directions, then this consultant contract would cover all of that work. So we do anticipate, in talking to Trent and the engineering group, that the actual costs of the city will pay for the consultant contract will be less than what's shown here. Again, these contracts are not to exceed amounts. Once again, though, I do recognize this is a very expensive contract, very expensive project. At this point, though, staff believes the city has the option to either award the contract now or reject all bids and rebid the project in the next few months. It's not something that we can take a lift station rehabilitation and reduce the scope. We just aren't at that point. However, if the council elects to rebid the project, we staff do not believe the bids will come in any less than what you're seeing today, because now all the bids are out there and we know what the bidders are, direction they're going. So that's my presentation. I'd be happy to answer questions.
I also see that in April 15th, city design consultant estimated to be at $3 million. And that was before a lot of the shortage of supplies.
Yeah,
Okay,
we've been
council member.
seeing, as you see.
Right.
I just was agreeing with you. Yeah, construction costs continue to rise.
And as you said, all the people already know it. And yeah, Councilmember Alversol.
Yeah, Director Langhelm. So will there, while this work is being done, or, in case of a fail on this thing, is there any loss of service to our citizens with water, as far as, because my understanding is right, a lift station basically pulls water uphill to get it to distribute?
The lift station in this case would take sewer that comes down into the low spot of a basin and then pumps it up and over the hill toward the treatment plant.
Got it. All right, thank you.
But as far as your question goes, we don't anticipate disruption of service. The plumbing, for all intents and purposes, is in the ground already to allow a bypass. So part of the cost of this project will be the contractor will have to install a bypass pump so that they can stop the sewer from flowing into the lift station and then collect it before it gets in the lift station and pump it back into the force main before it can even touch the lift station. So it can go completely offline and sewer will still continue to flow.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, I've heard from a couple of constituents that perhaps we shouldn't be bidding things right now, given the high construction costs, unless we absolutely have to. I mean, I know in the home building, it's the same thing. The bids are coming in incredibly high because if we'll pay them, they'll do it. But if not, they've got plenty of other work to do. So my suggestion was going to be that we wait and rebid it, but I understand your point that because the numbers are out there, maybe it won't come down, which is frustrating. So I don't know. This is a lot of money over budget. No fault of yours or your staff. It's just the situation in hand. But if we move forward with this tonight, I mean, if we don't have to go out to bid for big projects like this, maybe we ought to wait so that the next time this happens, those numbers aren't out there and we can wait until the building cycle is a little bit slower and we can get a more reasonable number, because this to me is not reasonable.
Sure. I agree. Waiting, if possible, could be a solution, given the climate we're in today. However, we have deferred this lift station rehabilitation project for years. A few years ago, well, maybe probably more than a few years ago now, one of the pumps just broke. And they don't make these pumps anymore. So we had to try and retrofit old parts and manufacture pump pieces that they just don't make anymore. And so that was quite an impact. We used some of the bypass pumping then. And the interior of some of these, and this is one of those, interior of the wet well is made out of concrete. There's so many off-gassing that happens in this lift station that it deteriorates the concrete wet well to a point where we need to get it replaced just to make sure we continue to have structural stability of the wet well and it doesn't collapse.
Okay, well,
there's points where.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then what you've just said, it sounds like we can't put this off, and a number of months is probably not going to make a difference. So I understand. But as you're looking forward towards other capital projects similar to this, I would say if we can hold off on bidding, maybe we should, because then the numbers won't be out there and we can hopefully get into a better climate. Thank you.
One thing I might mention, I've known about this price for a month, and it's and then we had the last one that was expensive, so that was discouraging. But again, we don't have the flexibility as a builder may of, well, I'm going to hold off on this or that. We do, if we can hold off on something, we're working with staff, Tony and I, and we will. But we have a city to run, and you can't just stop maintaining your items just because prices go up, because you're a city. You've got, 10, 12,000 people that depend upon our services. So if we could wait, we would have not brought this forward. So just so you're aware, it's discouraging for me too, but we can't just wait until prices go down if in fact they do. Councilmember Himes.
Yes. Do we know what the split is between material and labor in this thing? I was looking for that and I couldn't determine that.
We won't find that out until we get what's called a schedule of values from the contractor. So we get the contractor under contract and we proceed with some of the back and forth with contracting documents. One of those is a schedule of values, and it will break down bid items.
Because I believe right now, obviously they're in the material arena, there seems to be a bubble going on right now, which in the whole construction business, from what I've seen, the labor part may be more stable than the material part. The material part may start to come back down, okay, from where we're at right now. But if we don't know what that split is, it'd be hard to bet on what's going to happen here. So I just that's the only question I had. If we had some clarity on that split, it might boost confidence or reduce confidence in waiting to see what's going to happen.
Councilmember Markley.
Yes, thank you. This might be a question for Mr. Rodenbach. On page 2, it says the wastewater fund ending fund balance is sufficient to cover the budget overrun amount for this project. Was there anything else that money was earmarked for, or is that just kind of an emergency fund that we can draw this from? I mean, I don't love the consistent overages that we're seeing, but again, I think it's kind of the way of the world at the moment. I'm certainly not placing blame on anybody, but I just wondered if we're taking this out of the wastewater fund ending fund balance. I know that they have, projected things down the line that they plan for with the wastewater fund. And so is this going to take away from anything else that's super important, or will that fund be able to regenerate itself a bit if we take this money out of it?
Well, this is a good time to take from it because we're undergoing a rate study right now. And so all costs are being reassessed and updated. And what it does is it may slide a project, but I don't think so. I think there's enough cushion there. And then certainly because what we budgeted, we know we don't do 100% of everything we've budgeted. So every unbudgeted project that doesn't get done, for now, that money isn't needed, and that's pushed forward. And so we pretty much roll things forward, and we're not that precise to where that money will make that much of a difference.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilmember Franich.
Yes, thank you. Very pleased to hear Councilmember Denson's comments. I really appreciate that. I think it's something that we need to think about. Jeff's answer about that this pump was breaking down. I mean, there were suggestions when we got the Ryan Street pump station overage, we should have maybe put that off. And maybe that was one that we should have put off because that one may have been able to be held together a little bit more than this one, according to what Mr. Langhelm had to say. But, this, Jeff, because part of this $3.1 million is the $400,000 for construction management. Construction support.
Yes. The construction support is above and beyond the 3.17 million.
Oh, so the 407,000, the professional services contract, construction support with Kennedy Jenks, That 400, what is that 407,000?
No, that 407,000 that you just referred to is the construction support for Kennedy Jenks. And then the Public Works construction contract at 3.17 million is intended to be just for construction award to Stellar J Construction. Maybe I misunderstood your question.
Yeah, if you look at the Stellar bid at 3.1, then take in those other three items, and that will total the 3.9. Under the proposed council action.
Well, so this, I'm looking at opinion of probable construction costs that says Kennedy Jenks Consultants on it. So this is the one that came up with 2.993 million. Paired
Yes,
by
So what page are you on, Councilmember Franich?
he's referring to something that was not included in the packet. He requested it earlier today, but I do know what he's referring to. Unfortunately, it looks like he's frozen.
Okay, so we'll wait for him to unfreeze and then he can clarify that a little bit more. We're going to come back to you. I thought there was someone else that had their hand up. Councilmember Franich, can you hear us at all? Okay. We are going to come back. We're going to open this up for public comment, and then we'll come back to Councilmember Franich. Open up the public comment period right now. Tony, were there any written comments or email comments that came in?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Any callers that wish to comment on this item? Okay, I don't see any callers. We will close the public comment period. And where'd he go? He's not there yet. Okay, Councilmember Wu.
Yes, thank you. So from what I've heard from Director Langhelm, this is an important project. It needs to be done and it's deteriorating. While we'd like to maybe go out for bid, so we don't believe that they're going to be any less, especially since the bidders all know what the cost is right now. So, and we can't really wait to do this. So I will move to authorize the mayor to execute a public works contract with Stellar J in an amount not to exceed $3,170,214.40. And secondly, I move to authorize the mayor to execute a professional services contract amendment number 2 for construction support services with Kennedy Jenkins in an amount not to exceed $407,136. Number 3, I move to authorize the mayor to execute a professional services contract for materials testing with MTC Inc. in an amount not to exceed $20,257. And 4, I move to authorize the city engineer to approve additional public works contract expenditures up to $250,000.
Second. Mayor, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Any council member, I would want to reach out to them. So I'm going to give Councilmember Franich a call and see if we can get him on the phone since he's not on that. So just bear with me one moment.
Mayor, Councilmember Franich is on the attendee side right now. If Josh can pull him over.
Okay, great.
I apologize for that. I lost my internet connection.
No worries. So we did a public comment. There weren't any public comment. And we had a motion and we had a second. And now we're back to making sure that your clarifying question gets answered. So if you'd like to continue, that would be fine.
No, it's something that I will bring up at the, I have some clarifying questions, not just in general. So I'm fine for right now. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we've got a motion, we've got a second. I'm going to see if there's any hands for more comments before we proceed to the vote. And yes, Councilmember Himes, got
Yeah.
under the bell.
Yeah, but while I don't like the price tag, I must admit, you're in my neck of the woods, so I know that area quite well. And the development out there that is in the pipeline right now is significant, particularly west of the hospital. There's a commercial center that's going in. West of the hospital, there's a 64 unit, I believe it's condos, if I remember correctly. Over in my neck of the woods, the gravel pit, there's action that will probably be starting here very shortly to develop the upper mine at least. So not only is the maintenance thing an issue, with the ongoing load, the load is going to go up, and it's not going to be too far out there, I don't believe, okay, based on what we're seeing in terms of zoning changes and preliminary plats and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I'm going to hold my nose and vote for this particular motion.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Those abstain? Okay, motion passes 7-0. Same thing, Jeff. If there's, we'll work in the next 3 to 4 months, 3 months, and if there's projects that seem to need to be dealt with, we'll deal with them. But if there's projects that can wait, figure out how we can wait, with Band-Aids or something. But you listen to the news, there's a lot of shortages of a lot of supplies all over, and it's going to go well into 2022. So I'm glad council passed this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got new business item 4, which was 3, which is first reading of adoption of ordinance 1466, establishing interim zoning controls, amending GHMC related to ESSHB 1220, emergency shelter and housing. Our report tonight is from our Community Development Director, Katrina Knudsen.
Thank you, Mayor. Technical difficulties here on my side. I apologize. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Council, this evening for your consideration is ordinance 1466, interim zoning controls, and this is related to a House bill that was passed earlier this year by the state legislature, 1220, regarding emergency shelter and housing. For some quick background, and for those who are on the call who may not be privy to this, the state legislature did pass and enacted Enbro's second substitute House bill. And it is described as ESSHB 1220 here in this presentation, and it was signed by the governor on May 12th. This is regarding transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, and emergency shelters. The bill was stated to pass to address the ongoing affordable housing and homelessness crises that are occurring within the Puget Sound. The bill requires all jurisdictions within Washington state that are planning under the Growth Management Act to undertake these immediate and several long-term actions in order to be consistent with this bill. I'm going to briefly go over the different sections of the bill and describe what the city is proposing in interim zoning controls and what the next steps are. Section 1 of the bill and section 2 of the bill do not require immediate action from the city. These are amendments that the legislature made to the Growth Management Act. The first is The housing goal is no longer an encourage for cities and other jurisdictions. It is a mandate of that the city is required to accommodate affordable housing. We jurisdictions are still awaiting guidance from the Department of Commerce on exactly what this will mean in our 2024 comprehensive plan update. And when we receive that information, we will notify council. The second section requires jurisdictions to inventory, analyze, and plan for moderately low, low, very low, extremely low, and low income households within our city. The bill also requires us to plan for and accommodate emergency housing and shelters, which the interim zoning regulations essentially take care of. However, the other portions with the other income levels are not being proposed to be addressed within these interim zoning controls and will be needing to be a work plan item within the 2024 periodic update. On this item, we are also awaiting Department of Commerce policy guidance on exactly if there's going to be funding for the city to look at our comp plan policies and development regulations to accommodate this, and exactly what benchmarks we will be expected to hit. Section 3 of this bill is really the meat and the potatoes of what are immediate required actions for the city to take. I've italicized here, and I will read it just into the record, but the city, this section preempts our local authority to prohibit certain types of housing and shelters. The bill says a code city shall not prohibit transitional housing or permanent supportive housing in any zones in which residential dwelling units or hotels are allowed. And also a code city shall not prohibit indoor emergency shelters or indoor emergency housing in any zones where hotels are allowed. I do have maps to show you those locations later in the presentation. These requirements within section 3 are effective as of the 30th of September and require city action. The bill does allow for the city to make some provisions for these uses within our use table and our zoning code, which these interim regulations propose, and I will describe those a little bit later. Section 4 is not applicable to the city as it's for non-code cities. Section 5 of the bill essentially states that the city may not use interim zoning controls or a moratorium to prohibit building permit applications for the uses that were described previously. And then section 6 just adds definitions of emergency housing, emergency shelter, and emergency income household or moderate income household to the Growth Management Act. There's no actions required of us on section 6. Within or attached to the council bill was the ordinance 1466. Within it, in section 2 and section 3, you will see new language that is being proposed for inclusion of chapter 1755, which are conditions for permanent supportive housing and transitional housing, and 1759 that are conditions within the code for emergency shelters and emergency housing. Within the attachment of the ordinance, you will see the city's typical land use matrix that shows all of our uses within the city and whether they're permitted, conditional use permit or not permitted. You'll note that within the uses that we're required to have within our zoning code, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, emergency shelters, and emergency housing, within all of the zones that we are required to allow them in, staff has made them a conditional use permit with a footnote to the section that supports them with conditions. As I noted earlier, the bill did allow for the city to put on certain conditions for occupancy, safety, spacing, density, etc., and those are done in the proposed chapter 1757 and 1755. I will show a map on the next slide, but just for transitional housing and permanent supportive housing, those are the uses that are required to be allowed in any zone where dwelling units are permitted or hotels. And so within our city code, that is all of our zones except for PI, ED, WR, WM, and WC. And then for emergency shelters and emergency housing, again, the state is requiring us to allow those uses within zones that the city currently permits hotels, which are RB2, DB, B2, C1, and PCD-C. Those are noted on these two maps. You'll note on the green side, the affected area, transitional housing and permanent supportive housing, all the areas in green are currently areas within the city where dwelling units and or hotels are allowed. And then on the right-hand side for emergency shelters and emergency housing zones, again, those are only the zones in which hotels are permitted. And you can see the affected areas in red. So what will the city do within the 6-month interim? We will have a mandatory public hearing within 60 days. And if this is passed tonight, we propose to have this hearing the same night as the short-term rentals, which would be October 11th. Staff would also propose that this be directed work program for the Planning Commission for consideration, public hearing, and recommendation. Now, through that public process, we cannot prohibit these uses from being cited within the city. However, within this short time period, as I noted, the sections with conditions for those uses of 1757 and 1755, staff tried to think of the conditions that we typically see on projects that have a potential of being impactful to the community, and we've added those in within the zone. What we would like is for the Planning Commission to take a look at those conditions and see if there's areas that we've missed that we can include more robust conditions, or if there's areas where they think that we don't need a condition, that we have had one. There is at least one city within the Puget Sound who is currently looking at their zones that they allow hotels in and looking to reduce the zones that hotels are allowed in order to reduce the potentials for the emergency shelters. That is problematic a little bit. That is something that if council directs the Planning Commission towards those sorts of looks at the zoning code, we could do that. We would just need to know going into that we have hotels located in at least 3 of the zones now. And if we did remove hotels from being a permitted use in those zones, that would make the hotels a non-conforming use. So again, there are a number of things that we can look at, conditions being one of them, where certain uses are allowed, but we cannot effectively prohibit any of these from being cited within the city. You may be wondering, what if this does not pass tonight? Do we need to pass this? Staff recommends that we pass this because then we have something within our regulations to say that these are conditional use permit required for these to be cited anywhere within the city. If we do not pass this evening, then we would not have code within our regulations in order to how to process these applications. And it would still be an allowed required use by the state. And we would not have our code to go by in order to effectively process these to the community standards. And Mayor, that wraps up my initial comments. I'm available if there are any questions for me.
Whose code would we follow? Would it be Pierce County's?
No, it'd be similar to us when we repealed the development agreement regulations from our code. We still have to go by the state's code to allow for development agreements. So even though they're not explicitly stated in our code, we would have to allow them. And that would be similar for these uses.
And there wouldn't be any regulations that they would have to follow. They could be right next door to each other. They could be near other uses that you don't want them to be near. There would be no maximum number of people per square footage, et cetera, et cetera. Just take a look at what we put into the ordinance itself, and none of those things would apply if we don't adopt this tonight.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity. Not good. Councilmember Franich.
Yes, can you go back on your presentation, Katrina, to section 3? And section 2 first, please. Okay, so the section 2 talks about planning for them and a plan for and accomplish emergency housing shelters. And then section 3, could you go to section 3 now, please?
Yes.
So isn't section 3, it talks about preempting us from doing that, but doesn't section 2, are those two sections contrary?
Thank you, Councilmember Franich. The two are not contrary. The section number 2, and I know the bill was, I will admit, not written very clear. However, section 2 is more from a comprehensive plan level. Section 2 is essentially requiring the city to be part of the analysis and planning so that the city's having policies, encouraging these things, maybe doing that through the SHAPE committee, where the city's taking some sort of policy or other action otherwise. The section 3 is where we would have to allow that if someone else wants to put these in our community. So the section 3 is more of the regulatory side. If someone comes to the city and wants to do these, this is telling us we have to allow that. Section 2 is more stating that within our comp plan, we need to address this, and within our housing element. So number 2 is more of a city action from a comp plan level. Section 3 is a regulatory requirement.
So section 3 is forcing us to do what section 2 talks about.
Very similar actions, yes.
Well, putting aside whether or not it's a good idea or not, for me personally, this is just a prime example of us losing local control. This is top-down government telling us what we have to do. And I just don't think that that's right for our citizens. I think the citizens elect us to do what's best for what we think is best at listening to our citizens for our community. And I only fear that more of this is going to be coming down the pike this legislative session. I'm surprised more of it didn't come down the pipe at the last legislative session. But, like I said, putting aside whether or not this is a good idea or not, this just is more of an erosion of local control. So, yeah, it's problematic.
Councilmember Franich, at the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee today, that Councilmember Markley, Rodenberg, and Denson sat on, there was a discussion about local control in regard to zoning and density. And I believe you'll be seeing that on the proposed legislative agenda.
That's great. Thank you.
Mayor, you're on mute.
That's section 2. Do we have till 2024? And we usually do our comp plan adjustments in fall. So we have till 2024 of fall to complete that inventory. Is that correct?
It would be, yes, the next periodic update is due by June 30th of 2024.
Okay. Has AWC weighed in on this at all?
They have weighed in on it. Again, the bill was passed. I think it was a surprise. And the AWC was basically hurry up cities, you need to do something, or else state law would trump your regulations.
Right. Councilmember Himes.
Yes, the question relative to the areas that we exempted particularly the waterfront Millville, I think was one of them. Waterfront commercial was another one. Are we relying on the escape clause in section 3 that it either has to have a residence or a hotel on it? That if it does have a residence on it or a hotel, then you can't restrict the application of this in that area.
Yeah, the good question for clarification. The green side for transitional housing and permanent supportive housing, the bill requires that we allow these in any zone where housing, dwelling units, or hotels are allowed. It doesn't mean that it has to be existing right now. It's just that on our use table, if it allows dwelling units or if it allows hotels, then they have to be permitted in that zone. On the red side, for the emergency shelter and emergency housing zones, the bill requires that we allow those to be sited in zones that allow for hotels. Whether or not there is a hotel or not was not part of the bill. It's if our zoning code allows those.
Okay. Oh, okay. And that follows under the land use designation? When you
Yeah,
say
under
allowed,
the,
it could be in there under the land use designation, the zoning change?
Yes.
Councilmember Abersold.
Yeah, I'm trying to interpret this, but it just feels like this is just kind of preempting a legal defense for our city and for our hotelers who, for, a large government just to say, hey, hotels, you now have to open up your rooms for homeless shelters is kind of what I feel like this is where this is going. And I don't think that that's really fair. I mean, I think homelessness is a terrible problem and we need to address it and everything, but I would hate to think that, the people who have put a lot of time and money and investment into creating a hotel, then have to allow homeless people in there who could come in and trash it and destroy the reputation of the hotel and everything. So this is, I think, kind of troubling. I'm not sure I like this.
Councilmember Abersold, I understand your concern. This bill does not require any hotel to allow for homeless to be within there. It would have to be a choice that the hotel would make.
But it seems like it's moving towards the direction where it's taking away their ability to reject that or have any kind of legal defense against it. If the city allows for it to happen, then where does the hoteler stand as far as zoning? But
Yeah, the hotel owners would be able to still operate a hotel.
Sure.
As they are now. They would not lose any of their rights. It would be totally incumbent upon them to make that decision if they wanted to, let's say, sell it to a housing coalition. But this is in no way forcing them out of business. And I do know that our hotels here are very successful. So I think it would be a stretch for them to do that. There are some other counties within Washington or cities within Washington where there are hotels that are transitioning over to being those sort of permanent supportive housing. And that is happening, but it would not be a requirement and they will not lose any of their rights.
Okay, now, even though it's a choice, churches are already in that jurisdiction. Is that correct?
One of the things that we want to look at further, Mayor, is churches and how they fit into this. However, one of the backwards of why we believe that adopting these regulations is a good thing for the city is, as Tony mentioned, under each of the sections, we've added in occupancy load requirements so that you can't have, you have to meet the IABC square footage for occupancy. So you can't have too many people in one area. Also, we've limited the number of dwelling units to what is allowed under our zoning code. So they would not, permanent supportive housing or emergency shelter would not be able to have more units than another property owner coming in for a different housing type to be allowed. So we have tried to think of those here. There are a couple of other questions that we will have for our city attorney regarding churches and how they'll utilize this during the planning commission process.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yes, Director Knudsen, correct me if I'm wrong, but the short of it is, if we pass this tonight, we'll have as much control as possible. If we do not pass this ordinance tonight, then the state will be taking control and telling us. So I think it's just a simple question, and all the debate can go on at a later time.
Yep, that is correct. By the city council adopting this tonight, we are putting into place regulations. Again, they may not be perfect because they were done quickly, but they do provide for the conditions that we feel necessary to meet the safety concerns and livability. And if we don't, you are correct. These applications would come in, would be a permitted use, and we would have no legal standing to disallow them.
And these regulations can be amended in the future.
Right. Yes. Councilmember Franich.
Yeah, what is going to be the process to set up the conditional use standards?
Well, Councilmember Franich, the conditional use standards that we have in the sections right now would be what they would be additional standards on top of the conditional use standards that are already in the code. Again, through the Planning Commission and public process, we can add conditions to those. I saw today, which again was too late after we published this, but there are at least 2 jurisdictions that are requiring a safety initial inspection of all of these different types of uses, and then an annual inspection with the building official and a police representative annually, just to ensure that the spacing, density, safety requirements are in place. And so that may be something that we want to consider as an additional condition. So to answer your question, the conditional use criteria from the code existing, as well as from the new sections that we've added.
Okay. Daniel, does this need just a simple majority, or does it need a supermajority?
Simple majority.
Okay. Okay, and as Councilmember Rodenberg said, there'll be a lot more discussion on this. It just is, if we want to, as much as we're being told what to do by big government, if we don't adopt this, then they basically do control what we do. So until we figure it out. So any other clarifying, Councilmember Rodenberg?
I was about to make the motion.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make the motion that we adopt interim zoning controls as it related to ESSHB 1220 emergency shelter and housing, local planning and development, better known as Ordinance 1466 on this first reading.
Do I have a second?
Second.
There's a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Abstain? Okay, motion passes 6-1. All right, so we have, okay, so you will proceed for the steps that are needed to be for October 11th.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Council reports and comments. First is we have our Public Works Committee meeting of September 14th, 2021. Councilmember Franich, would you like to give that report?
Yes. Yeah, we only had 2 items of business there. We talked about the Olympic Drive right turn lane, the timing for an extension there, whether or not in the future we will make that right out only, the main entrance going into what I guess what is now the new Metropolitan Market. So I thought we had a pretty good discussion on that. And then we had a brief discussion on the Cedar Crest water systems August 2021 incident. They are a private water provider, and apparently in August of this year, they had some low pressure issues out of one or more of their wells, but we kind of decided that they are guided by some state regulations, and it's really not the city's business to get involved in that. They're regulated by the state. So that was pretty much it. It was a short meeting. Our next meeting is October 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we had our Finance and Safety Committee meeting of September 20th, 21. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yes, we did have a Finance and Safety Committee meeting on September 20th. All committee members were present. There was only 2 items on the agenda. The first item was the 6-year financial forecast, and that was presented by Dave Rodenbach. And it was just a forecast to cover the period between 2021 and 2027. And it was just for general street operating funds. It really wasn't intended to provide insight into details of operations or anything else. But the highlights of that was that due to ARPA funds received, we had a general fund ending balance projected about 15%. In 2022, sales taxes are projected to have a 10% increase, with the second paper of payment of ARPA funds in 2022. The projection is to have $1.1 million increase in the general fund ending balance. It was a really well put together presentation by Director Rodenbach. He also presented a graph. All this information was pretty timely in as much as we're looking and going into the budget cycle now. And I'm sure this forecast will play a part in that budget cycle, and all council members will get a chance to review the information. The other item had to do more with safety and actually having a no wake buoy at the entrance to the Gig Harbor. And after a lot of discussion and input from Chief Busey, it was determined that these buoys are, you see them once in a while at other marinas or other bays, but they just become part of the landscape and no one really pays attention to them. And the fact that there's only very occasional, is there anybody exceeding the no wake zone? The idea of putting a buoy out at our entrance, considering the amount of chain you'd have to have, it would do more harm than good. So we did discuss the idea that possibly some of the private piers or some of the other marinas might put out additional signage. That incidentally does also become part of the landscape. So no action was required by the city. And that concluded the meeting.
Great. Thank you. Then we have Intergovernmental Affairs Committee meeting of September 27th, 2021, which was today. Councilmember Denson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We had a great meeting today of our Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. Let's see, brief highlights. You all know that we put in a number of requests to the federal government for different infrastructure related projects. We're still waiting to hear on that because we've got to wait for Congress to pass the big infrastructure bill. We should have some news on that on Thursday, at least for the hard infrastructure, not the social infrastructure types of things that they're discussing. But Dale Learn, our federal lobbyist, said that we will hear the results of our request by the end of the year for sure. So fingers crossed on that. The committee worked on its 2022 state legislative agenda, which will be coming to you probably later in October or early November. It's a short session this year, so it was recommended to us that we be reasonable in our requests and consistent with what we've requested in the past. So we're continuing forward with our State Route 16 congestion relief projects, the same projects that we put forward last year. We're going to keep asking for those since the legislators are familiar with them, and we'll keep pushing forward on those. We're going to put the sports complex back in with a $2 million local community project ask. We got $500,000 last year from one of the funds, so we'll go back for an additional $2 million. we'll see what we get. We're going to work on with our legislators on that. And then for a couple key policy issues that we're going to focus on, we are going to look at the issue of police reform and ask the legislature to work with the WASC, which is the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, on clarifying some of the ambiguities in several of the laws that were passed last year, and also make adjustments to correct some of the unintended consequences that Chief Busey, for example, was saying has resulted in some lower levels of service here in Gig Harbor and in other communities. So we'll be working on that, working on state culvert funding. That was one of our goals for last year as well. So that's important in this community. And also pertinent to some of our discussions today, one of the priorities is to look at land use requirements to sustain local planning and land use controls. So that's pertinent to what we talked about today. And then we have a number of other issue areas that we'll have on our list to keep an eye on, but those are the top 3 policy issues. So we'll be reviewing a final copy of that in a couple weeks, and we'll bring that back for the full council to look at and weigh in on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that report. Now it's council comments. Councilmember Wu.
Yes, thank you. I know a number of us were very concerned this evening to see a lack of public comment on items number 3 and 4. And perhaps some of that is legal, but as Councilmember Avasol made a comment, it looks very bad for the public. And so we have a council rules and regulations, or rules and guidelines policy information where we have policies that pertain to council meetings. And if there's support from the council, I'd like to have a discussion at least, or bring forward to be included in those guidelines. The council intends to accept public comment on all business items. If everybody's in favor of that, then I like to have that brought forward for inclusion into council rules and guidelines. Anybody want to comment on this?
I'll comment for a moment, because actually I did not say that anyone could not comment during non-agenda items. So I made it very clear tonight that it would not be included in the recording. And I believe that's a law. I'll clarify that with Daniel for a minute, but I did say tonight, I wrote it out very specific, that if you comment on these 2 items during it will not be included in the public hearing. Now I think that's a law. So we did not stop anyone from commenting on the items tonight. And I already made it clear to a lot of council, and I included it to the public, that I was not going to stop them. If they commented today on non-agenda items, we were not going to stop them. So I have to correct you. I did not stop people from commenting on these 2 items on non-agenda items. I made that very clear.
So thank you, but I didn't say that you did.
Well, you said we didn't allow public comment on those items tonight. And that's,
so I said the council, if everybody would like to, the council could put in our rules and regulations to accept public comment on all business items. When these items were put on the agenda, public comment was left out of items number 3 and 4. I think it's a bad look for our citizens, and those comments should be allowed, should be in those agenda items.
They were allowed to comment tonight on non-agenda items. That was never taken away from them. And Daniel, clarity, if someone commented tonight, by law, it's not included in the hearing on the 11th. Is that correct?
I mean, the purpose of the public hearing is to have bring together at one time during the public hearing, which is different than an allowed public comment period. But Councilmember Rook, I do actually think that language is already included in there. In the new business section, it says that public comment will be allowed on all new business items unless the matter is governed by ordinance or statute that prohibits the receipt of public comment. And so that I would just refer you to that. That may be what you're looking for. I'm happy to talk about it offline with you as well.
So do you think then that this public comment, having this on listed in the agenda item, is precluded by statute or what you were reading there?
Well, so again, I don't want to get too much into this on the record, but in order to be a party that can challenge what the council did, you have to be within, have participated orally or in writing in the public participation process. And that process for a moratorium is defined by statute as a public hearing. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be in that public process as prescribed by statute, and that they then have the opportunity to be part of that record. And so it's by no means, and that public hearing in some situations could occur at that reading where it's being adopted. More often than not, you're kind of moving to that so quickly that noticing requirements for that are challenging. But that's possible, but having it after the fact and getting all those comments at once is actually protecting the rights of those individuals to have their comments as part of the record.
So item number 3, that was not a moratorium, that still did not have public comment in it. Is there a legal reason for that?
Well, I mean, it's the same thing for that one. It's just whether or not the public hearing could be noticed in time to be for the hearing or for the meeting. And both of those were moving very quickly there right up until getting onto the agenda. So the public hearing didn't get noticed.
But
and you have 60 days to do that.
You couldn't still make a comment on item number 3.
My comments are applicable to both. There was not unique to one or the other.
Okay, I still think it looks pretty bad, just for the record. Thank you.
Councilmember Markley.
Yes, thank you. So a couple things. I had the privilege of attending on the 17th, the Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation prayer breakfast at Chapel Hill. It was very moving. It was just wonderful to hear from these community members who have lost children, who have spouses that were lost or injured. And it was just incredibly uplifting. This event is just wonderful. So I wanted to thank Leslie Main and all of the people that are involved in this organization. It is wonderful. It's extremely helpful to the military members of our community that are suffering with PTSD. And there were so many stories of triumph and not just tragedy, but overcoming PTSD and being able to live normal lives. And so it was just very honoring to them, honoring to our community. And that was awesome. And then I've had a couple business owners contact me regarding the construction. People down in Harborview Drive, they've had a significant loss in income due to the road closures. And that, you know, I don't know if there's anything we can really do about that other than just encourage people to continue shopping downtown. You know, if there's a particular store you love, go there, you know, just brave the traffic and go there. So these businesses, you know, they're coming into what should be their busiest season, getting ready for selling things for Christmas. And they're very worried that this loss in revenue is going to continue. And they're already struggling, trying to recover from being shut down from COVID. And this is almost like worse, you know, for them that this is happening again. They're losing some revenue. So just a reminder to shop local, shop downtown, brave the traffic and support our local businesses because they are really worried. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I know I filled a lot of calls and it's very hard on them. It really is. It's tough. Councilmember Hines.
Yeah, first of all, a shout out for Laura Pettit. I think she's been doing a super job getting out ahead of some of these things before they explode on social media and all kinds of wild stories start to propagate. The classic being the traffic jam on Route 16 that somehow got associated with the Harborview Drive sewer work. Okay, and we were heavily criticized for lack of planning, and I agreed that we didn't plan the wreck on 16 at the right time. We should have made it at nighttime so nobody would have been involved or inconvenienced. But the point here is, from what I can see, Laura's getting out ahead of some of these things. Given that, I think the two ordinances we passed tonight with some very simple language, I'm sure Laura can come up with it. These would be two really good ones to get out in front of. I think Councilmember Rodenberg's comments called, when you look at the alternative, it's either this or it's this, and there isn't any others, okay? Suddenly the wisdom of this thing starts to show. If we don't get that story out there, it'll be, oh no, these crazy council members did it again. You know, they don't know what they're doing. So what I would suggest strongly is that we get Laura involved in getting a story out on this, get it on the city website, get it on our Facebook site, get it out there before people get carried away with what a goofy decision we made tonight, or a couple of decisions we made tonight. So anyway, and again, hats off to her. She seems to be doing a fantastic job from my perspective.
Thank you. Councilmember Abersold.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to circle back on this public comment topic, because I would remind some of our council members and our mayor that when we were running for election last time, prior to that, there was people coming into city council with signs that said the sound of silence, because the city council weren't allowing them to speak. We made a pledge on transparency, and part of transparency is allowing the public to speak. We have at the bottom of our agenda here tonight on city council meeting procedures, and I think this is the sentence that says it all. The city council desires to allow a maximum opportunity for public comment. And I think as a citizen, anytime you see an official government document that excludes public comment, when you know that every other agenda has allowed for public comment, it just infuriates you. It makes you angry. It makes you not trust your citizen or your government. And again, I think it's a bad look. I don't think we should ever make this mistake again. And I don't know how this happened, but I'm just disappointed in that. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yeah, I just want to tie on to what Council Member Markley said about the permission to start Dreaming Foundation. At the Gig Harbor Sportsman's Club, we support and sponsor 3 of their events. And one of them just is going to happen this Friday. And it's a competitive trap shoot of novice and expert shooters. I encourage everyone to come out. You don't need to know how to shoot. All you need is a checkbook, and I'll show you how to shoot. We would raise thousands of dollars for PTSD at that particular event. 2 weeks ago, we helped them by parking about 500 cars on our trap fields for the Race for a Soldier. So that's one of the nonprofits in Gig Harbor that we should all do all we can for. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Franich.
Yeah, I have a question that this kind of circles back to something that came up at the last meeting. I guess this is some more for the mayor than anybody else. I'm just wondering, when it comes to the pylon signage at Twalcott Estuary, is the tribe happy with the way the materials and the language? I mean, is everything pretty good with them on that?
Yeah, we actually, the tribe has a good relationship with the city, and I talked to our 4 representatives from the tribe quite a lot, and they have okayed the 1199 resolution. It basically allowed the mayor to work with entities that supported the tribe, and we have worked with anthropologists and some other people, and the tribe has worked with them to make sure that they are okay with the language. And the tribe has signed off on that. And we've actually followed the guidelines that, boy, you thought that when we were done with 1199 of council, there were a lot of other groups that we worked with, and we've already got a fabricator that's going ahead and making the panels. There's going to be 5 panels. They're a 1/4 inch thick. They're 316 stainless steel panels. They're 40 inches long, 15 inches wide. They're going to be on the pylons. They're going to have invisible screws. So actually, we've done more above and beyond what we were asked to do. And the tribe basically says, you know, you fulfilled what we like. We're happy, and now it's your job to work on the rest. You do the installing. So yeah, that's going well.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. There was, I think, some lingering questions by some of the public that maybe that process was kind of off base a little bit. So I'm glad to hear, as long as the tribe's giving it its blessing, I think that's the important part at this point in time.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. I would like to say that, you know, our grant application for the LTAC grants closed today, and we had 17 grant applications. So we did really well. There's even there's a lot of different grants that came in that we hadn't seen before. So so I'm pleased to have that. That's something that Laurel will be going through. And so anyway, that's good to know. Our 2022 grant application closed today, and we received 17 of them. So that's great. Okay.
Oh, you got announcements for other meetings.
Yeah, exactly. So planning and building announcements of other upcoming meetings is the planning and building committee meeting of Monday, October 4th at 3 p.m. We have a board and commission candidate review committee meeting on Monday, October 11th. And there's a lot of other meetings on our website for everyone to look at. So with that, do I have a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Do I have a second? It is right there as Albertson and Himes. All right, everyone. We missed the rain. We stayed inside. There was a lot of it. All right. The meeting is adjourned. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.